One, two, three to the four. Grab me some good drink of some sort. You know, whilst the TikToks, yes, the what the hell? It's always something ringing. Ringing in places and times it's not supposed to ring. But today the agenda will agenda. Uh, Let me see. I'm gonna open the tube. I'm supposed to be getting these things ready before I join, but sometimes laziness, man. Laziness takes over. Is it TikTok live? Yes, it's live. People will join soon, hopefully. No sound detected? No, there is a sound detected. Yeah. So today the topic of today is going to be the aftermath of leaving religion and also deconstructing colonial ideologies or what it may be, whatever you feel the need to deconstruct or is deconstructible. These are the topics of today. So, as usual, those of you who are new here, I need to monologue for a brief period after I have monologued for at least 30 minutes or 1 hour. Then we can open the panel for discussions. But, before that, cheers. I have the good drink with me. And it needs to be drunken. you know, Whatever the past things of drink is, I think the past tense of drink is to drink, right? Or drunk is the past tense of drink. But and sometimes we need to use the presence to put emphasis on the message we are trying to. How is this connected to the Bluetooth? Sometimes it takes time for me to set up this. Let me see these gadgets. Damn, help me. That's why I need a moderator. I need a moderator to help me moderate these things. So yeah, the aftermath of deconstructing and leaving religion. It's one thing that when we speak about decolonization and deconstructing, it's a natural topic to usually have. And I don't know why I haven't had that topic, but yeah. So the topic. Or the questions of the body is the psychology behind deconstructing, and one thing I've come to the realization is that people who call themselves to be or see themselves to be spiritual, in air quotes, but not religious, are people who have actually deconstructed or are deconstructing the faith that they hold, either being democracy, Islam, Christianity, or whatever. Good afternoon to you too, my dear sister. And that is the truth, that when people who say that, yes, I am spiritual but not religious, there's a reason behind why people would claim to be spiritual but not religious. And the reason is that either they know that the belief that they hold that does not feed or does not align with the type of life they want to live. Therefore, they try to create variations of said religion or said belief in order to create a reality that they want to live in. And that's the reason why people claim that they are spiritual but not religious. And you can find a plethora of many people who describe themselves as such, both especially Africans whom are Christians. They tend to claim to be spiritual but not religious, and that is there's a reason behind it. And there's a one. argument that people make to people who claim that either they are not religious or don't want to be partake in the religion is what they call church hurt. That means that someone or something happened in church that has made them deviate from the religion that they hold, the faith that they hold, or they do not want to, or no longer want to participate in the norms of being uh, the average Christian or the average believer. And that's the reason why they deviate and create variations of said religion to feed their ego. So when people deconstruct, and I remember my deconstructing journey, why I began to deconstruct from the ideas that was bestowed upon me. It is ideas such as um, when to eat, what to eat, and so on. So it always starts with why. Why? Why do I have to do it? Why? And then it came to my realization that some things people couldn't answer it, or either it is a belief they held, but they didn't understand why they held those beliefs, or either it's just some of these things are usually what we call to protect kids from, doing things they're not supposed to do, or uh, investigate into things that they don't want to, they are not supposed to be investigating. Oh, my English is vanishing. So when a person starts questioning the faith, one thing that happens is what we call an identity crisis, the search of self. So it being, for example, I remember myself, when you realize that they have lied to you, the meaning Christians and Muslims or whatever people who introduce you into said belief have lied to you. That's when you decide either to distance yourself from them or otherwise. So for me, that was my beginning, my journey of deconstructing, is because I felt someone lied to me. And I think my life would have been easier if people just straight out told me the truth. And since I found people who believed in said religion to be lying to me, I decided, you know what, it's about time I pack my things and find my own way. So that's what I did for a couple of years, and then came to the other aspect of my deconstruction journey is disconstruct from the colonial mentality that I had, the way I viewed things, the way we viewed each other as Africans, the way we interacted with each other as Africans. It was one thing that I had to change, that in many cases, I do hear them a lot, that many Africans will say, oh, well, these people don't deserve nice things. And I ask myself, why is it that people actually hold the belief that Africans, deserve nice things, or they will destroy it? Well, and it's one thing that I think is particularly funny, that we rob ourselves from progressions in ways that we shouldn't rob ourselves in that way. I.e., when people say that um, we don't deserve nice things, or these people they only deserve uh, the uh, the leftovers. These are things that we also have to deconstruct and learn to, view people, or give people the benefit of the doubt. And it's one thing that we as Africans and people who have lived in a post-colonial countries have to take into consideration when we interact with each other. So yes, the identity crisis, it is one that either when you come to realization, especially people who, when they question faith, they are met with violence. It is one that gives people that a realization that, why is that if I ask questions, and sometimes it could be genuinely good questions, but then you are met with such violence that sometimes it makes you question the standing, or the people who you call family or friends or people of that belief, you know. And in many countries or in many societies and families that question the faith that the family holds, and I will call this the family faith. It's dangerous, or it's a death sentence. And I think that alone is scary, that you live amongst people, or we live with people. Mm. One must take a sip of the good drink, people. I know the addictions are real. It's just a energy drink, people. TikTok, don't do your thing. It's just an energy drink. All right. Nothing special, nothing fishy. Just an energy drink. So yeah, back to what I was saying. So then one seek to search for oneself, and you do it in ways either you find new groups, friends, or people who align with you. So in many cases, if within the same family you have cousins, you have distant cousins, brothers, or so on, who you know secretly have deconstructed or are deconstructed, you tend to align with them more than the people who are hell bent on said religion or said belief. And usually that's what happens. So at school you find friends and so on, and in many people who have actually had a friends of various beliefs and so on, people encourage their children to actually be friends with people of the same belief, and there is a good reason for it, because people do believe that if people who a group of friends, if there's someone who does not hold the same faith, it is actually easier for you to deconstruct, for them to drag you out of said faith. But the reality is that there is more likelihood of you actually finding the religion or the belief that you hold more distasteful if you are in a group of people of the same faith. And usually that's what happens to the majority of people who hold said belief. So, yes, deconstruction is good, and it is a natural phase that many people who believe in religion go through. And in many people, it is a scary thing to go through. In many cases, it's more scarier than traveling to a new country. Is to question or decide to do away with the faith that you hold. So yeah, I have a group of friends who do have family members who are religious, and they themselves do not subscribe to said religion, but then they have to pretend that they are uh, religious. And the reason why they need to pretend, because it is about the well-being of themselves. It is about the survival of either the benefits that they get or something else. So therefore, it is within their, call it, personal interest to actually pretend to subscribe or to be part of said religion to maintain the community protection in many cases, or the community benefits. And that's why many people pretend to be part of said religion, even though we know that they are actually and deeply not, and really don't fuck with the religion as they claim. We see this multiple times when people who move from their home countries and come to Europe, all of a sudden they are it's easier for them to transition from the faith they hold into something that is more called atheism, something that is more anti-religion, if many may put it. So then there's a reason, because Europe and these Western countries put allowance for it, or allow people who do not subscribe to religion to grow, whilst in other places they are shut down, and in the worst case scenario they are killed. This manus, man, it doesn't stand still. Why? So then the second stage is religious trauma. uh, and it goes speaks on when faith hurts. Faith is one thing that it's supposed to bring harmony, it's supposed to bring peace, it is supposed to bring wellness onto the people who follow and beyond. But one thing that is evident and is clear in many in abundance is that religion have brought nothing but pain. The majority of chaos in this world, the majority of wars, the majority of all bad things that have mainly happened on this planet, when you look at human history, is because of religion. And the other aspect of it is politics, either being democracy, communism, and so on. I had a discussion with a elderly woman the other day, and she was actually from the former Soviet Union. The Russia now is the only country that holds. Is it true that people need to speak about religious psychosis? Yeah, yeah, it is true. People need to speak about about these things. So yeah, so then we were having the discussion, and she asked me, "Is there any difference between uh, democracy and what was the other one? Democracy and I forgot what the other one was. The one that was showing that not socialism but communism. Was there any difference?" And I say, to me, a four person, I don't see difference between communism and democracy. For me, it's all the same. The agenda is always clear and the same: is to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. So she basically don't care whether she's under a communistic rule or a democratic rule, because at the end of the day, the effects are the same. So yeah, so back to what I'm saying is that when religion hurts, so religion hurts when people impose their personal beliefs on you. And people who have family members who are ultra religious, we know these people within our ranks. We know them within our family, within our friend groups, within our church groups, within our mosques, and other social groups. These are people who are two faced. These are people who claim or speak about one thing, but they'll do the opposite. And these are the people that will demand or quote religion and use religion in ways that will benefit them. But once religion is used to judge them, all of a sudden they find other ways to deviate from such judgment. And these are the people who use religion to hurt. We see it in Somalia. We see it in Ghana. We see it in other places where people use religion as a tool to impose and influence and push their personal agenda. So then the natural question comes, and I think we had this on a previous live, and it was about the expansion of religion, I especially Islam in Europe. And one thing that I spoke and I do speak about is that I, for one, am against the expansion of Islam uh, within the borders of Europe, especially if it comes from Muslims who haven't achieved such greatness. Let me give an example. Okay, Somalia, for example, is a country which is predominantly Muslim, where you find Somalians in abundance in Europe. So then lies the question: there are some Somalian men who hold the view that Europe should be under Islamic law. Not only Somalians, but other people too hold the that view. But my thing is, a person who is a student of colonization, a person who do pay attention to colonization, the effects of colonization. I am opposed the expansion of Islam within Europe because of one thing. The first thing is that when colonizers were able to achieve what they achieve in many parts of Africa and the world, they tried such behavior first within their walls. That there is nothing in the continent of Africa that has been built by the Europeans that they never built for themselves. The only thing that is evidently true that you can find in people who are interested in history and so on is that when you find the pyramids and so on, you see that Europeans don't have pyramids within the continent of Europe because it was something that was built there before they came. So I, for one, when going back to the first statement, is that Europe Muslims who want to expand Islam within the walls of Europe should actually achieve the expansion of Islam to extend where it is beneficial, it is without cruelty within their countries before they search elsewhere. Because the mock up of you spreading your religion, right, into a different person's country in which you haven't achieved it within your own country, the thing that happened is that you only spread the disease that is negative. You spread only the how do you call it, the shallowness. You spread all of the chaos that you have, because that's the only thing you know. You haven't achieved anything but that. That is the reason why I'm against. Let me see, the comment says something, and let me see the guy that just joined. His name is Michael. I should refer to you as Michael. Hello, Michael. How do you do?
Hey Victor, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm also fine. Thank you very much. Was there something I said that caught your eye and or or caught your ear rather that made you join the?
Um, Probably more so I was reading The Aftermath of Deconstruction and Leaving Religion. and what deconstruction does to the psyche. Um, Now, I'm not sure. Are you a religious person?
No, I am not.
Okay, have you deconstructed?
Yes, I have.
What faith did you deconstruct and why?
I deconstructed Christianity, and
Okay,
the
really?
why. The why is that the call it the expectations or the things that I've been told about Christianity, they didn't match the reality in which I lived in.
Okay, what things were you taught about Christianity that didn't match the reality of where you live?
Okay, first and foremost, we I grew up in Ghana, right, in a town called Teshi, and I remember in order for me to understand Christianity, I need to know English. I learned to speak English later on in life. So when they take you these places of worship and people are telling you what to do, and since there's a language barrier, I never understood the purpose of what they do or whatever they said. So then, gradually, I started going to school and picking up a little bit of English. So then, people will tell you, let's say that Jesus is coming too soon or whatever it may be. And mind you, when you go to school and learn a different language, in many cases you take it as literal, right? That soon mean in reasonable time or other things and that Christians did say at the time. I don't remember everything that they did say, but then I realized it doesn't match with the reality that I I actually lived in. All when I came to realization, it didn't match, and the behavior of Christians, especially the behavior of Christians, it is a behavior in which I found to be distasteful, especially the Christians around me. It is behavior that was hostile, and it's one thing that I don't want to be part of.
Okay, sure. I'm just gonna start with this, because you mentioned something in relation to a language barrier or churches that you went to. Now, whilst I'm not going to dispute that individual experience with maybe an English church that you went to, this is going to be. Have you heard of what an argument from personal incredulity is?
No,
So, an argument from personal incredulity, it's basically a fallacy where somebody says that something isn't true or that it has to be false because they either find it hard to believe or difficult to understand. And if we're talking in relation to the truth of Christianity, Christianity was understood by people long before the Bible was ever even translated into English. In fact, historically speaking, the Roman Catholic Church persecuted a man called William Tyndale, who in the 16th century translated the first ever Latin Bible into modern day English and actually hung him at the stake, which meant that for 15 centuries, or 15, yeah, 15 centuries, um, the Bible was never actually in English, and the people who professed and held true to the faith weren't speaking English as their primary language. It would either be Latin, Greek, and even the Jewish people from the Jewish diaspora, which later spread out after the first century. Um, and I'd also say because you're Ghanaian, well, at least according to recent census data, about 70% of the Ghanaian population is going to identify as Christian. Me personally, I live in the UK. I know many churches around East London that are Tree and speak Tree in their churches. In fact, there are actually multiple Bible translations in different African dialects too, to be able to make the faith understandable and intelligible to people who aren't just going to be English. So I'm not sure where the claim that you have to be English to understand the teachings of Christianity comes from, especially considering the fact that most of our faith's primary source material comes from the New Testament, and the New Testament was written in Greek. So I don't really know where that comes from.
okay. The claim comes from the colonial history of Ghana, and I know you are actually aware about the British involvement in the Gold Coast, modern day Ghana, in which English became the domain in which everything academic took place. And when the Bible first came to Ghana, I have the original copy of Ghana called the original, but one of the oldest copy of the Bible in Ghana. Mind you, prior to Europeans coming to Africa, many Africans didn't have a written language, so our languages were oral. So everything that we spoke or we did was actually just orally recorded. So either through hymns, songs, whatever it may be. There are a few paintings or statues to, record things, but we didn't have uh, literature in way of recording, or we didn't use it as widely as we do today. So then came the fact that people are teaching you about the God, right? Either the priest will read in English and then translate it to the language that you spoke so that you can understand it, right? I remember my introduction to Christianity later on was also through missionaries. They came and they had these, how do you call it? Those projectors that they put on those whiteboard and just show you videos of this white man, and if you do this X, Y, Z, you're gonna burn in hell, and so on. So these are the realities of in which I many of us saw. But then the claim that people will say, "Oh, God is salvation. God is gonna solve your problems," right? Always and everything that I saw around me was problems, and they say, "Pray and ask and it shall be given." Well, I am asking, or I've asked and it was never given. So then, well, so what's the point? you know so what's the point of keeping asking? Why do I have to repeat myself?
Yeah. Um, well, again, I think you're going to fall into what we know as a genetic fallacy, where essentially you're saying, this is how I received the faith, and based on my own personal perception of how it was received, that therefore dictates whether the faith itself is going to be true. I can agree from an historical perspective when you look at the British involvement into Ghana, if you're talking about them coming for coastal trade, specifically mainly for gold resources, and then as you mentioned later on the slave trade. Um, if you're talking about 1874, where the Gold Coast was declared a British Crown colony after the Dutch had left that area, and then Britain, some a number of years later, eventually conquers the Ashanti Empire um, in Ghana, and after World War I, um, it was actually added to the League of Nations mandate. I believe British Togoland, which actually used to be German territory, now gets added to that League of Nations mandate. 50 years on from that, you then have Ghana eventually becoming the first sub Saharan African country to then gain independence from Britain. Now, all this is going to show me is that a traditionally Christian colonial power invaded Ghana, and people who are not directly a part of that colonial power in terms of its authority and its practices, which is going to be Christian missionaries that come in the 20th century, came to spread the message of the gospel in the same language that people spoke the colonial power. It's not going to tell me anything about whether the faith that these guys are professing is going to be true or false. It's just drawing on historical inferences that are going to be true of both backgrounds. Like, there are many Africans in Ghana that practice different forms of African spirituality, yet there are also Ghanaians, for example, historically, Nigerians as well. I'm a Nigerian person by ethnicity who also practiced slavery in the past with other cultures and sometimes even enslaved and sold their own people into slavery as well. I think the history of the world, for a large dimension, is going to involve a history of slavery, um, a degree or a measure of colonialism, and moral evils that all of us are going to attest. But I don't think that these histories of the world is going to be the arbiter of telling me what is true and what is false. Like you mentioned, how, oh, you would pray to God and you would ask and say that, oh, because they said ask and you will receive, why am I asking therefore and not receiving? Well, again, it's still going to go down to an argument of personal testimony, because another Christian in Ghana could just say, well, I asked and I received. So if both of you are claiming the exact same thing happened, but you have two completely different conclusions in your experience, how can I judge by you guys' experiences which God is real and which God is false? So I don't think that's a very good way to measure
Let
the
me tell you
truth of the
one thing.
claims of Christianity.
Christians claim that what they believe is truth and universal truth, right?
We do.
And that is one thing that I find to be problematic, because one thing that is evidently clear, that the experience of Christians varies. It's not a uniform or universal thing. That one thing, what you experience as a Christian will be different from what your father or your mother will experience as a Christian. And that alone is problematic for people who do not believe, because the claim is that uniformity. On the matter of slavery, and yes, it is true that people have, how would I say, involved themselves in some kind of slavery throughout the world history, be it indentured or chattel.
Mm-hmm.
But the type of slavery that Christians brought to the world is one that we are still feeling the effects of. The chattel slavery, which or slavery that gave got the or gained the approval of God. That
I
kind of
strongly
slavery.
disagree with that.
Sorry.
Yeah, I strongly disagree with that.
Of course you will, because it is within your interest to something like this. But it is the type of slavery that got the approval of God. And without approval, we know the history of slavery in Africa and beyond, because it was ordained or approved by God.
Okay, cool. I think I'll just start with that. Since this is a topic that I've debated a long time, having been a black Christian, it's something that I'm going to get asked a lot about. So, actually, Christians and Christianity, I would argue, was actually the driving force behind the abolitionist movement, which I would argue provided both the theological rationale for the abolitionist movement as well as the backbone of organizing it, specifically through the Quakers movement and the evangelical revival that you actually made mention of when you were talking about the missionaries. So, if we're speaking about history, um, people like William Wilberforce, for example, he was an evangelical Anglican. He became the parliamentary face of the abolitionist movement after he converted to Christ. And that conversion convinced him that the slave trade was a moral sin that Britain required repentance of. And he actually led a set of evangelicals called the Clapham sect that devoted themselves to practical Christianity and social reform alongside the Quakers movement. And their coalition, who used to lobby again, because Wakerforce is an MP, their coalition actually used to lobby a lot of people in Parliament and led to the 1807 Act in Britain that eventually led to abolishing the slave trade, and the 1833 Act that led to the ending of slavery in the British Empire. The vast majority of Christian movements actually were very much opposed to slavery. We have popes um, long into the infancy of the transatlantic slave trade condemning the transatlantic slave trade. So you telling me that these are coming from Western powers like Spain, Portugal, Britain, etc., doesn't mean that these Western powers are going to be symbolic or representative of the entire Christian faith. In fact, the slave Bible, as we have heard about it in history, removes the entire narrative of the Exodus, which is literally God's story of him leading his chosen people out of a place of slavery. Um, Removed verses like Exodus 16, 21, 16, that talks about how anybody who sells their brother should be put to death, ultimately establishing the death penalty for slave trading. Removed 79% of the entire New Testament, including verses that talk about how he came to set the captives free. So I don't think it's going to be God ordained or theologically consistent at all with the mind of God that chattel slavery, which oppressed a neighbor in the way that it happened in the transatlantic slave trade, was going to be justified or ordained by God. And in fact, it was Christians that led the abolitionist movement. So I'm not sure where you're getting the idea that this was God ordained or
Okay.
God planned
Let's
for this to happen.
sorry
Yeah, that's
to
a bit
sorry to
strange.
cut you off. I thought you asked
Yeah,
me a
it's okay.
question. First and foremost, when we are speaking of the Exodus, I think it was speaking of God's chosen people. That is not you. It is talking about the Israelites, right? Those are God's chosen people. And when we speak of the abolition of slavery, right? It is things that was led by humans or people. It was never the God that said, you know what, fine. I once said that you could have slaves. Now you can't have slaves anymore. No, it was people who actually led the movement, because people understood that the enslavement of people is wrong throughout all times, and that was the reason why um, these things happen. And many people will argue that these people are not Christian because Christianity did allow the acquisitions of slaves. It's in the Bible, clear as day, both in the New and the Old Testament. So when you make the argument that Christianity, yes, there are people who actually fought, which is a human thing to do, to fight for freedom. I don't think it is one that is. I understand why you credit their behavior or their actions to Christianity because that's something good, and that's what many Christians do. They only credit good things to Christianity and the bad things to something else. But yet again, I do credit both where credit is due. So I say that yes, there are Christians that are good and Christians that are bad, and the God is also good and evil. I say that, and I don't stand one bit with the especially that brainwashing settings that people say, like how do you call it? God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. I think that is what the most atrocious thing to indoctrinate your children under.
Okay. I mean, I'm planning to teach my children that because I believe it to be true, that it's consistent with God's nature, that God is good. But if you're saying that beyond there being bad Christians and there being good Christians, which anybody could agree with, I'd love for you to show me where God Himself teaches or makes conditions that are acceptable, even outside of the Exodus narrative. Um, the actions of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. And the reason why I say that is because, as I said, Exodus 21:16 directly forbids kidnapping or man stealing as a capital crime, condemning the trade's core method. Deuteronomy 24:7 explicitly forbids stealing and selling people. First Timothy 1 verse 9 and 10 literally list man stealers alongside more as lawbreakers who are on the same level as a murderer. Galatians 3:28 declares that there is spiritual equality, which undercuts the racial justification that was used in the slave trade. Deuteronomy 23 speaks about how you're forbidden to return an escaped slave, which opposes the
Wait,
fugitive slave
wait.
laws that were used.
Let us analyze. Sorry to cut you off, but let us analyze the text in which you are claiming one by one.
Okay,
Oh,
so just to go too far so that I don't speak
I don't
over
think we should speak at the same time because we have to mute each other. Okay, give me a verse, then I can we can analyze it. Or you want me to
you. Yeah,
to state my first?
no, it's fine. I'll give it to you.
No, so
Just
I
go
can
to
pull it up
Deuteronomy
here.
24 and verse 7.
Okay, hold a second. Okay, I am here. Deuteronomy 20 21 verse 7.
No, 24. 24.
24. Okay. It says, if someone is caught kidnapping a fellow Israelite,
Correct.
treating or selling them as a slave, the kidnapper must die. You must
Right.
purge the evil from amongst you. It says Israelites. That means the God is speaking to his fellow Israelites, right?
Yeah,
Or
I'm not
to the
disagreeing
Israel
with that.
to the Israelites. Yeah. So how does that correlate to you as a
Yeah, so
Nigerian?
the reason why this is going to apply
Okay.
in the context of the transatlantic slave trade is because he's saying that you can't steal and kidnap from amongst your own people. The
No, it does not
transatlantic
say
slave.
that. It does not say that.
Yes, it
It
does. It
stays
said.
Israelites.
Yeah, the reason why it says Israelites is because the law was given to Moses. It doesn't mean that the law isn't going to retroactively apply to other people
Listen,
groups from stealing their own people,
it doesn't
which is why
apply
I'm
to you
pulling up
when it
these other
says
verses.
Israelites. If you are given a
Yeah, I can
clear,
bring other verses that don't just say Israelites. That's why
okay,
I quoted
bring
the other
bring
two.
the verse. It says Israelites. So
Okay.
one thing that
And
I
again,
I realize that many Christians do is
you're
when
trying
you
to
read
interpret our text for us. Like,
when
what?
you no when you read the Bible, you read yourself as the Israelites,
No, I
and
don't.
you read yourself as his chosen people because that's what clear you do. How else can you see Israelites then claim it to be you?
The same way that I can see Adam and Eve, and Adam can be a representation of the entirety of humanity. The idea that I'm reading myself into the text is going to be a claim of eisegesis. But again, the claims that are made about slavery are going to go beyond just provisions that are specifically made for the Israelites. Exodus 21:16 doesn't even mention Israelites. It says word for word, he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. It doesn't mention Israelite, it doesn't mention non Israelite in this verse. It literally says anybody who goes and steals somebody, takes them, and claims them to be their own possession, right? It says, or if he be found in his hand, it says that he shall surely be put to death. This directly undercuts the
L-
foundation
l-
of the transatlantic slave trade,
Okay,
which is going to involve man stealing. So when
okay,
I quote Deuteronomy 24, it's showing that the nature and the character of God is that he's against people enslaving and stealing from their own individuals, which
okay,
exactly happened in the transatlantic slave trade when many sub-Saharan Africans stole and sold their own people into slavery to make profit from the Europeans.
okay. Let's say it is true without reading that verse. I'm gonna say it's true what you're saying. But then
Okay.
here lies something. What Christians claim that the book is perfect, right? And when we speak of contradiction, right? Let's say the same book saying the opposite against each other, speaking against each other, right? The same Bible also speaks about the acquisition of slaves, right? So how is it possible that in one verse it says you should kill anyone that catches slave or enslaves people, and in the other it says you should go out and acquire slaves?
Yeah, so you're gonna have to show me what the verse is that's the contradiction.
Of course.
And by the way, Christians don't make the claim that the Bible is perfect. They make the claim that the Bible is perfectly inspired by the Holy Spirit, which involves contradiction.
No.
Those are two different claims.
That's a new claim. Hey, people in the comments, help me here,
No, the claim of
because
the
because
Bible being divinely inspired has
Christians
always
do
been accurate.
behave. Let's see, 24.
The
Hold on,
claim
let
has
me.
always been that the Bible is inspired by the Holy Spirit. That's Second Timothy 3 and verse 16.
44. Okay, the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse
46 by chance?
Leviticus
Mm-hmm.
25, verse 40,
Verse.
verse 44. 25,
I'm very
44.
familiar with this.
Hold on,
Verse.
hold on, hold on, hold on. 55. Yeah, right. So you've made your claim. So the same book makes the second claim, and it says, "Your male and female slaves are to come from nations around you. From them you may buy slaves." You use the word buy, right? Slaves. You may also buy some of the temporarily residents living amongst you and members of their clan born in your country, and they will become your property. Okay? You can bequeath them to your children's as inheritance. You know, without even
Yep.
continuing, let's dissect this. Okay, first it speaks about buying people, right? Secondly, it speaks about property.
Sure.
Doesn't it contradict the first statement that you say?
No, it doesn't. And
How
I'm going to
doesn't
show
it
you why it
contradict?
doesn't. And this is
Okay,
why context always matters. So,
okay,
if you're
yes,
talking
yes.
about Leviticus 25:44,
Mhm.
um, it's going to say that foreign slaves were to be bought from the surrounding nations, but they weren't going to be kidnapped or stolen from surrounding nations. This is a crucial legal determination because in Exodus 21:16, it makes kidnapping a capital crime, and meaning that even under the foreign slave provision, the method used to fill the transatlantic slave trade, which is going to be raiding villages and capturing people, was itself illegal under the very same legal code cited to defend it using this scripture. Now, many slave owners would actually use Leviticus 25:44 down to verse 46 to try and support the idea um, of chattel slavery. But the reason why it's not going to follow is because when you read the context of Leviticus 25:44, it required a level of indentured servitude. This is actually going to refer to a level of indentured servitude.
It
Why?
doesn't.
The purchasing, and the reason why it does is because by purchasing, it means that the individuals who are being acquired for slavery, it's the same way of me hiring a group of individuals to come and build me a house. In other words, let's say
Listen,
God gives a commandment to go and
listen,
build a temple or to
listen.
go and build a city,
I don't know
and these
how
people
you
go and
have
acquire
been able to
slaves who are
turn
people who are going to be in
that
poverty
statement
to go and
into a statement of indentured servitude when it's talking about property.
yeah, property means that they're going to be the master's possession. Doesn't mean that they're going to be viewed as
Exactly,
physical objects
exactly.
because they're still because again the same Old Testament that you're quoting from still states that all men are going to be made equally in the image of God in His likeness.
And that's
So
what we
even though
call
they're going
about
to be somebody
contradiction.
else's slave,
And
it's
that's
not
the
a
reason why people
contradiction.
do
It's
deconstruct
not a
from Christianity.
contradiction. You're interpreting a contradiction to try and feed
Bro,
your narrative.
how is that a contradiction when it's clearly saying that it's saying one thing, and in the next verse it's saying the opposite?
Yeah, because we don't interpret scriptures verbatim. Where did you get the
Okay,
idea
okay.
that when you're
If
interpreting
if
scripture
if you are
that you're going
saying
to
that
take a
that
verbatim reader?
we don't interpret, oh, my English is vanishing, the words verbatim, right? That lies the fact that when we speak about the Ten Commandments, that means is a free, or it doesn't apply to the Ten Commandments.
No, it means that when we're interpreting the Ten Commandments, we have to go and study Jewish literature, how the Jews understood the commandments that were given to
So
Moses, and to
so
understand
so
the
if it
context of
says
who
thou
God is.
shalt not
For
kill,
example,
mm-hmm,
yeah, because that's a perfect example. I was going to
mm-hmm,
bring that up.
okay,
Thou
bring it
shalt
up.
not kill.
Mm-hmm.
By definition, to kill somebody and to murder somebody are completely different.
Oh,
Murder is going to be the unjustified killing of an innocent human being. Meanwhile, when you go and check the definition of kill in the Hebrew, it's going to have the same legal connotations as being unlawful or unjustified, which means that the word that translates to the Old English term kill is actually going to be accurately describing what we would modernly call murder. So if I just take a blank reading, I'm
okay,
going to
hold on.
conclude
Let's
that
fact
from the
check.
Ten
Let's fact
Commandments,
check. Let's
there's
fact check
no
that
good
claim.
reason to kill anybody.
Let's fact
Okay,
check.
sure. I'll bring it
Let's
up in the
fact check.
Hebrew.
No, no, hold on. Now I'm gonna do it here. Don't worry. Just hold on for me. So I'm gonna ask to feed in the explanation of kill in Old English. Is that what you're referring to? Or
No,
Old Hebrew?
I'm talking about no. I'm talking about the Hebrew. I
Okay.
specifically said let's
To
pull up
to
the Hebrew
to
from
to
Exodus 2013.
what is the meaning of kill, or to give us the correct understanding of the word kill
Yeah, so
in
kill
Old
in
Hebrew?
Hebrew is
Okay.
the Hebrew term rasha.
Okay. Hold on. Let me.
It literally means to murder, premeditated.
Okay.
That's literally what it means.
Hold on. Oh fuck. Sorry. Explain the meaning of the word kill in Old Hebrew.
Yeah, it means to murder. It means to pre. I just told you. It
Yeah,
means
hold
to
on, hold on.
premeditate.
I muted you just because I wanted to feed in the explanation from the AI. Just hold on.
Oh, you're using AI mid debate. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what
That's
that's what
fine.
I do.
Whatever.
Sorry. Hold on.
So it's the Hebrew term rashak, and it literally means to
In
murder.
biblical ancient Hebrew, there isn't one single word that corresponds exactly to the English kill. Several Hebrew verbs are translated as kill, slay, or murder, and the distinction matters. The most important is harag, to kill, slay, put to death. It is a general word for causing someone to die and can be used for killing in battle, killing an individual, or other forms of killing. Latza, to murder, slay, unlawfully. This is the verb famously used in Exodus 20:13, traditionally
Thank you so
translated,
much. You
thou
just
shalt
proved
not
my point.
kill, lotirsa. Many modern translations therefore render it, you shall not murder.
There you go.
Moot,
There you
to
go.
die or cause someone to die, depending on the grammatical form. It is related to the Hebrew word for death. Why the distinction matters. The commandment, you shall not kill, can therefore be misleading if understood as an absolute prohibition against every act of killing. The Hebrew rasa specifically concerns wrongful, unlawful killing or murder in its biblical contexts. The Hebrew Bible contains other passages describing warfare, capital punishment, and killing without using rasa in the same way. So if you're asking specifically about the famous commandment, thou shalt not kill, is more precisely, you shall not murder. If you want,
Thank you so
I can also
much. Okay,
explain
that's
the
all we had to
Hebrew
hear.
word for
That's all we
kill.
had to hear. Like, so again, now that you've used AI to fact check me and prove that I wasn't lying to you,
Yeah, it's
and
very
we now
important to
concede.
to use
Yeah,
because
so
we keep things factual here, you know.
that's good. That's
It,
good.
I
I
just
like the
had to
debate.
mute a couple of times so that I can hear the things and people can hear it so that, you know, we try to
That's no
not to
problem. I
try
mean, I could
talk
have
over
just
each
shown
other
you my
here.
screen. Like I've got the Hebrew up, I've got the
No, no, no,
concordance up.
no.
I could have
The
just
thing
shown it
is,
to
the
you.
thing is, I am not. It's not, I don't believe you, but it's like it's important that we actually learn something and we actually, you know, they just say things out of our asses and we
Yeah, of
take
course,
that to
that's
be
fine. But
yeah.
that's the reason why the point of me bringing that up in relation to our convo about slavery
Hmm.
is that when we're interpreting the writings of the Old Testament,
Hmm.
it's important that even what is taught or what it seems to be true as a plain reading of the text still needs to be contextualized. Number one, with the original language. Number two, with the reason why these verses were being written. Because if God is going to speak about the Israelites acquiring slaves from surrounding regions, there's a reason why he's talking about it. It's because there's a practice that's going on that's contextualizing the words that God is saying. And obviously, as you just rightfully said, there are multiple different words for kill, murder, that all exist in the Hebrew language, and the context is going to define whatever the usage is going to be. And that's going to come back to my point about indentured servitude in Leviticus 25, which still isn't going to generate any sort of contradiction because the
Listen,
people who are acquiring slaves in Leviticus 25:44 aren't kidnapping or stealing these people against their own will, which means that when it says purchase, it's talking about the fact that they have to provide them with a wage, which is the reason why
where does it
when these
state they
people
have
run
to
away
provide
from
them
their
with a
masters
wage?
by the word purchase. Do you know what that word purchase means?
You only purchase things to the owner. You only pay to the owner, not
All
the
right, let's take
things
a
you
look at
purchase.
what the word purchase means as well.
Okay.
I'll just pull it up for you so you can see it.
You want me to
So Leviticus. No, I don't need you to play your AI overview mid debate. Like, if you made the claim before the debate, I'd assume that you probably knew what the
no,
word
no,
meant.
we're speaking about purchase, right? A dictionary definition of purchase.
No, no, I'm not talking about the dictionary definition. We're talking about the biblical Hebrew definition of the word.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So do you
if
read
we
the
look at
Bible in
Leviticus,
Hebrew or
the Old Testament, yeah, we transliterate it in Hebrew, sure.
okay?
So every time I read it in English, I have a Hebrew concordance next to me while I'm studying to make sure that if I see a word that seems to not make sense, I can clarify it with the original language. Because obviously, English is great, but I don't think that English is gonna capture the entirety of, you know, what the Hebrew word says.
Okay.
All right, so let me just pull that up for you. Um, do, 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 do. But yeah, sorry, you can go on. I'm just while I'm pulling that up, you can go and speak.
No, no. We have time. You know, mind you, we do. I do this every Sunday for 3 hours. So
Oh, okay, no worries.
there is
It's
time
loading now.
to
So.
pull up. It's an interesting conversation. That's why I'm waiting daily to
Mm-hmm.
to see because
Okay.
one thing that I know that slavery, no matter what form they take, both indentured or chattel, they're always linked to violence, and the aftermath of slavery is one that is so detrimental to human beings and human society. That is one that we should not for a second make excuses for them. That's the reason why you have these debates and speak in the manner that does not support. You know, sometimes I do have these debates with Muslims and they speak about the
Mm-hmm.
Islamic way of how to treat slaves, and I tell them I don't care because at the end of the day, in videos that we've seen, in true witness testimonials, we see that people are treated poorly. So it's irrelevant what the book says. We only judge slavery based on the human experience portion of it. And that is the reason why we forbid or we turn to speak against slavery. Did you find the text you were looking for?
Yeah, I'm just going to Leviticus 25.
Okay, no worries.
So
Just whenever.
if we even start from verse, what do you want to call it? From verse
I'll say 40 to 40. Let me see. Um, I'm reading the surrounding passages. That's why.
The book of Leviticus.
Yeah, Leviticus 25, the one that you brought up.
Okay, I have it with me here.
So yeah, I'll just tell you which ones, so you don't have to like um spend time.
Yeah, you just read it. The topic of slavery and religion is one that is dirty. Is one that is distasteful. So many people hold said belief, both Christianity, Islam, you name it. So I understand why many people shy away from the topic of slavery, because when people hear slavery, they panic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry. So can I read it now?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned Israelite slaves and the difference in legal status between an Israelite slave and a slave from a different nation. I'd like to clarify that for you.
Okay.
So if we take a look at verse 42, it says, "They are my servants, which I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as bondmen. You shall not rule over them with rigor, but shall fear the Lord thy God. Both thy bondmen," this is now verse 44 that you brought up, "both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which you shall have, shall be of the heathen that are around you. Of them shall ye buy." Oh,
Sorry, it's just I had to verify the TikTok,
Oh, that's
the
no
live.
problem. Of them shall ye buy bondmen and bondmaids. So if we're talking about foreign slaves, right? Foreign slaves that had debt or came from poverty didn't have the exact same legal rights as Israelites who went into servitude because of debt. Those people who were foreign could be allowed to be held for slaves for life, assuming that whatever their debt or obligation they had to the Israelites was never paid off, though they had to be treated humanely. And we know that these slaves had to be treated humanely from what we see in the book of Exodus 20 and
Where
verse 8 down to verse 11,
okay,
which says that um which says that you should never oppress a stranger who is within your gates, specifically in verse 10.
it doesn't speak of treating of slavery. It says a stranger at your gates. You are talking
Yeah,
about,
other scriptures talk about how you treat people who are slaves.
and where is it stated?
Yeah, I'll show you in the book of Exodus.
Okay, you reading the King James version?
Yeah, but you can read any other
No,
but
I
I
don't know
just
why
use King
people
James for this conversation.
read the King James version thinking it's any better than the NIV, but
Because the King James Version, in comparison to the NIV, has a higher formal equivalency rating, which basically means that when it was being translated,
it's the
the
same.
authors were going for more of a word for word translation rather
It's
than
the
thought for
same.
thought.
It's actually the same. The
Actually, the
NIV,
NIV contains
the NIV
actually
and the
the
King
NIV
James
misses one
version
of
is the
verses.
same. It's just that the
That's not true.
NIV is closer to the way we speak without the these and the thous and so on.
That's actually not true. The NIV actually removes a lot of verses of the King James version.
It's the same. It just uses words that you people don't like.
It's I mean that's not true, but that's a different topic. Just stay on topic. So yeah, so pull up duh, 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 duh. This should be Exodus 22. Yes.
X 22.
Exodus 22 and verse 21.
Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt.
Okay, so we have a very clear commandment from God. Don't mistreat and don't oppress people. So
No, it
the
doesn't say that.
context,
It doesn't say that.
a foreigner, it does. You just read it
Bro,
out. Wait, read it
gentlemen,
again.
gentlemen, listen. You clearly said
Wait, read it out again.
there's a place in the Bible that speaks about the way you ought to treat a slave. So, i.e.,
Yeah, slaves can be foreigners.
I am expecting it's not the same thing. A slave and a foreigner is not the same thing. And you know them well, that's not the same thing.
What?
A
It says a
slave.
foreigner, period,
Okay,
whether they are a
you were a
slave or not.
foreigner in Egypt, in UK. Are you a slave?
Would you
How
say?
you? Aren't you a foreigner in someone else's country right now?
I mean,
Are
are
you
you
a
talking
slave?
by ethnicity?
Yeah. Are you a slave?
My status isn't a slave, no.
So
But it
how are you
doesn't take
saying
away from
being
the
a
fact that I'm
foreigner and
still
a
a
slave
foreigner.
is the same thing?
I'm not saying being a foreigner and a slave is the same thing. I'm
Did you?
saying that you can be both a foreigner and a slave at the same time. But the principle of not vexing or oppressing a foreigner is also going to apply to slaves because those slaves are still foreigners.
It
And the
doesn't.
fact that he made mention, hold
It
on, the
doesn't
fact that
say
he
it.
even made mention to the fact of you were once foreigners in the nation of Egypt, i.e., making reference to their past slavery oppression because they were slaves when they were in Egypt. Why does he only refer to them as foreigners and not as slaves? But even though whilst they were in Egypt for over 400 years, they were slaves. So he's comparing how you were being treated in the nation of Israel, and he's saying when other people come to your nations, don't oppress them and don't vex them. So he's comparing the experience of slaves in Egypt to people who are foreigners in their land, slaves or not slaves.
You,
So
you,
if anything, he's given them even better legal protection than what the Israelites had when they were in Egypt.
you know, one thing that I think is funny to Christians, especially African Christians, that you guys are very, very good, especially Black Hebrews, as mental gymnastics. That you can,
Black Hebrew Israelites aren't Christians, by the way.
but I'm
They're
telling you, those
heretics.
people, I've had debates with Black Hebrews, but
Yeah, they're
whatever they
heretics,
might
bro.
be, they can pull explanation from places to fit their narrative. And one thing that I'll tell you is this: someone who have had this conversation multiple times, as a Black person, the history of
Okay.
slavery is distasteful, especially knowing the history of Africans and what people had to endure during slavery. So then, as it is true to the Black Hebrew Israelites and to any other African who are Christian, is that you find ways to justify why your people were enslaved. And with that, you go to the extreme levels in the verses to try to make that mental gymnastics to, feed your narratives. And that's the thing, is that you want to say, oh, the Chris slavery wasn't bad. It was because, okay, then if I'm going to ask you the question, why were Africans or your ancestors enslaved?
Yeah, multiple reasons. The reason why the transatlantic slave trade happened, number one, I would say, was due to a lot of African greed from African slave owners that actually started in sub-Saharan Africa, and other regions as well in the African diaspora, where you had individuals that wanted to make a cheap profit, and after Portugal and Portuguese, Spanish, and European explorers would come over to the nation, primarily seeking things like natural resources, as I said in Ghana's case, things like gold, etc., etc. These nations, and let's say diamonds from Congo, all of those kinds of other natural minerals that African countries are very rich in, they also saw the potential of getting and extracting cheaper slave labor from these regions and justifying extracting that cheaper slave labor based on pseudo race science. In other words, dehumanizing people that have different skin colors to almost justify the fact that we can treat them as second class citizens. And to pay, and to be able to get them to submit to that privilege, they would pay other Africans to sell their own Africans and allow them to board these ships and then transport them to their countries where they would now be held and treated as slaves for hundreds of years. So that's the reason why the transatlantic slave trade happened.
No,
So again, it's got
it's not
absolutely
entirely
nothing to
true.
do with. Notice how everything that I just said there has absolutely nothing to do with Christian theology.
Let
And
me tell you one
if we're
thing:
talking about, hold on, because you said that I'm doing
mental
mental
gymnastics.
gymnastics.
Yeah.
If I'm doing mental gymnastics, you still have to deal with the fact that the abolitionist movement was run by Christians and that Christians for hundreds of years completely opposed the slave trade on multiple different institutions. The Roman Catholic
Listen,
Church opposed it, the Eastern Orthodox Church
the
opposed it,
the Roman
Protestant
Catholic Church
movement
was the
opposed it,
person who actually
Quakers movement opposed it,
put the
evangelicals opposed it.
slavery in
Like
motion,
all of these movements that are
bro.
objectively Christian and not heretical
The Catholic Church,
directly opposed the slave trade.
the
So the fact
Catholic
that there was a
Church.
group of individuals that claimed to be Christian who had a slave Bible that I already told you removed 80% of the content of the Old
Listen,
and New Testament from it doesn't mean that slavery is justified or taught by Christians.
You,
Like
you,
what?
let me tell you one thing. The Catholic Church was the church that the body, the entity that put slavery in motion. Okay, with the doctrine of discovery. So whether
What's the
they
evidence for that?
what?
Wait, we're not gonna go from that. Wait. That's a wild claim. What's the evidence for that?
Of course. I will put I will pull up
Yeah, and try
the
not to look
proofs.
on AI this time because it
Uh,
makes you look a bit dishonest.
Sorry, you said?
Try not to like search up your argument on AI mid debate because it
I'm
does
not
kind of
searching. I
appear like
use
it's
it
a bit
just to fact
dishonest.
check claims that you made, by the way.
No, I'm not. Yeah, that's fine for me. But
And
even for me,
that's the
like
only reason why I
fact
used
checking a
it.
claim about you don't need to fact check a claim about a word in Hebrew by searching it up on AI. You can literally go to
It's
the
it
concordance and literally read the
listen,
Hebrew
listen.
terms for yourself.
Did the AI lie?
Actually, AI can make mistakes. Every single
Of
AI
course,
algorithm states
anything,
that it can
even
make
human
mistakes.
beings do make
Gemini
mistake.
makes mistakes.
Even human
ChatGPT makes
beings in
mistakes.
books,
Claude
I've
makes
seen
mistakes.
books that people make mistake, but that's despite the point. The point is that I use it to fact check people mid debates so people don't lie, so we don't spread
So you
mis.
use a fallible source to fact check people in the middle of a debate.
Listen, people use the Bible to fact check people in mid debates and anything, so I mean it's the same. Either or, that's beside the point. Even now, I lost my what question did you ask again?
Yeah, I asked you, can you show me any evidence that the magisterium of the Roman Catholic Church, by the way, I'm not even a Roman Catholic, funny enough, but can you show me any evidence that the magisterium of the Roman Catholic
Okay.
Church supported the transatlantic slave trade? That's what I'm asking for. And try not to put this one into AI, please. Like, I'm just asking for evidence.
Let me see. What was the name of that pope? Who put the doctrine of discovery in motion? Let me see. I've forgotten his name. Because one thing that we know to be true that prior to colonization, the missionaries came down first, right? And one thing, the reason why, and this is supposed to add, and that's what I wanted to say, to add to your first claim that among the things, the reason why the transatlantic slave trade happened was also Europeans needed or discovered that Africans were better at working in harsher conditions. So that means they could work on their plantations better than other uh, people. And I think the German put it that the
Mm-hmm.
English made lousy slaves, that the Africans were better slaves than the, how do you call it,
That's true.
than the
Yeah,
English
they
or the
believe
white
that.
people. Yeah. So that was what
So
happened.
what's this got to do with Christianity? Exactly.
What?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm asking,
I think
what's that got to do with
aren't
Christianity?
Catholic people Christians?
We already conceded earlier, yeah. We already conceded earlier in the conversation that there can be good Christians and bad Christians. I'm saying, what's that got to do with Catholic theology? So when I ask you, can
Mhm.
you show me the magisterium teaching this as church doctrine? I'm saying as either dogma or a binding principle of faith that all Catholics are bound to believe in. Can you
Listen,
show me how the magisterium affirmed the transatlantic slave trade? That's the question.
if you're asking the question in that sense, then the answer is no, because uh,
Wow.
it was only the elite people within power who actually put that emotion that gave their, how do you call it, their blessing to the missionaries to do the things they did. Of course, in many things, and the same thing goes with, we can say, with Muslims and Islam, where there are Muslims who do support Muslims who do terrorist act, and I hope I don't get canceled for this on TikTok and YouTube. But anyways,
Yeah, I hope so.
yeah. But of course,
I got banned for that one. You know, I want to be
yeah,
careful.
and I know my YouTube has been flagged for that, but anyway, it's beside the point.
Oh,
We are not children here. But yes, that's the thing. That's so. Of course, there are people that will be opposed. You being a Christian, if there should be other Christians going out here and slaying people, of course you will stand against it, and I hope you stand against it. It's not because you're a
mhm.
Christian; it's because you're a good person and you understand that slavery and these things are wrong, right?
Yes. Yeah, of course. Like, I think I'm not. I want to clarify something before we even go forward.
Mhm,
I'm not denying that there are Christians who participated in the slave trade. Of course,
mhm,
there are. That's undeniable. I think the conversation isn't about whether Christians did it, Muslims did it, atheists did it, agnostics did it, people who believed in ancient Kemet did it. Like, it's not about who done it. It's about who justified it and what did they use as their justification. And I think you briefly touched on it when you were talking about Portugal and how like they believed Africans would make physically better slaves than the English and the European people. You touched on an idea known as race science. Have you heard of race science before?
I have.
Yeah, so it's like it's a weird
The classification of
pseudo.
race.
Yeah, so it's like it's this weird pseudoscience category where not only do we classify human um by their racial characteristics, like having blonde hair, blue eyes, and you have eugenics philosophy that the Nazis believed in, but you also dehumanize other sorts of humans for lacking those characteristics. So, for example, the Jews and their nose size and their head shape, black people and their eye shape and the kinkiness of their hair, all of those kinds of things, right? Making them appear to be more like animals or monkeys and primates, whereas the white master race is going to be ones who are more advanced and better and superior in all ways than the black people. These ideologies at their core underpin the basis of the transatlantic slave trade. And if those ideas at their core contradict Christian theology and Christian teaching amongst various different sects and established branches of the Christian faith, it's going to lead to the conclusion that the transatlantic slave trade is incompatible with Christianity. There are Christians who commit mortal sin. There are
Wait, hold on,
Christians
hold
who
on, hold
sin
on, hold
against
on,
God
hold
in
on.
multiple different ways.
I want you to
But
to go
yeah,
go
go on.
back. I want you to go back. So you said that and I wanted you to repeat what you said last. That is what is incompatible with Christianity.
The theology that underpins the transatlantic slave trade
Hmm.
is incompatible with Christian theology. And I've
And
shown that in multiple
and
different
and
ways.
that's what I'm saying, that it is not true.
Well, then you have to contest with the weight of evidence that I've given you to show that it's going to be
And
true,
listen, uh,
including the references
the
from the Old
the
Testament.
uh, the
Um,
transatlantic slave trade being the fact that I have pulled up multiple verses to show to you that in the Bible that you hold to be true, it says you can have slaves, and both in the Old and the New Testaments,
mhm.
on especially the book of Peter and so on, or in Matthew, about slaves obey your earthly masters and so on.
Oh, I'd love to go there.
Of course,
Yeah, we can go there as
these
well.
are things that constitutes and prove that yes, Christianity is actually intertwined, in which deeply connected to slave trade and slavery.
Yeah, but the problem is with that you're gonna have to reconcile is the fact that I've already reconciled every single one of those passages. I've conceded that there are forms of slavery, i.e., indented servitude,
Hmm.
that are going to be permissible in the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Hmm.
I've conceded, and I can
And chattel
concede
slavery and
that
chattel
in
slavery.
no chattel slavery isn't going to be consistent with those things
Chattel
because of
slavery,
other
so
hold on,
far
hold
as
on,
there
hold
is
on,
an
hold
action
on.
of
I'm
purchasing of
trying to respond to
slaves,
you.
of purchase
Hold
of
on.
slave, that is chattel
Can you
slavery.
define chattel slavery for me?
Of course, the action in which you buy or trade a person, or at least in terms of movable goods, that is chattel slavery. The
Um
exchange of people with money, that is chattel slavery.
actually I would go a bit further and I would say that chattel slavery means that the individuals don't have any legal personhood. So if we're talking about chattel slavery, right, it
Hmm.
means that you're classing an enslaved people as a chattel, which means they're going to be a movable personal property rather than a legal person.
Yeah.
Now, even in the scriptures that you brought that talk about how their slave own or the master owns their slave, still under Old Testament preconditions, every single human being, including the foreigner that's going to be in your land, isn't going to be allowed to be oppressed, isn't going to allowed to be vexed, and is still a human being made equally in the image of God and the likeness of God,
It,
which means they're going to have personhood. So even under the Old Testament's perspective of human beings, everybody, including the slave, which is the reason why in the New Testament the Bible says there is neither slave nor free, because human by their makeup and by their humanity, all of them are going to share the characteristics that make them to be a human person. So the word property isn't going to negate the idea um negate the idea that these guys have personhood. Rather, it's going to make reference to the fact that they're under their owner's jurisdiction until they finish off paying off their debts.
Listen,
So I've already reconciled that verse. And again,
yet again.
you're still not engaging with
Mhm.
Exodus 21:16, which openly condemns the very practice that exchanged those people over with
Wait,
the
hold
death
on. Which
penalty.
verse did you
You're
say?
not engaging with that.
Which verse are you saying?
Exodus 21:16. You're yet to
Okay,
engage with that. Exodus
let's hold
20:21. You're
on.
yet to engage with that.
Exodus 22. Which verse was it again?
21.
22 verse 21, right? And as I
That's
said,
talking about oppression. Yeah.
and it says again, do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner from where. Is that what you're talking about?
In regards to chattel slavery, yeah. By definition, you have
How?
to oppress.
How do you
Yeah.
link?
You don't believe that oppression is linked to chattel slavery?
No, no. What I'm saying is that how do you link
Wait, hold
foreigners
on. Do you
to
believe
slaves?
oppression is linked to chattel slavery?
Oppression? Not necessarily.
Yeah, it's what? You don't but what? Wow.
Listen,
That was not something I was expecting
I
to
said
hear on
not
this Sunday.
necessarily. Listen, let me tell you, there are
Wait,
people
you
who
don't
can be what?
So wait, you don't believe that black people were oppressed in the transatlantic slave trade?
You said if oppression is linked to chattel slavery, and I said not
Yeah, if you're
necessarily.
dehumanizing somebody to the point that
Huh?
they don't have human status
Mhm.
and they haven't got legal personhood, that's oppression by
Oh,
definition. That's
okay,
legal oppression.
listen. When
Like
you when
what?
you claim things like that, right? When you speak of
Mhm.
oppression, people can be oppressed in ways that they are not, let's say, in the confinement of slavery, right? But then there are others who, how would say, are oppressed because of slavery, like it is the call it the result of them being slaves. Do you see where I'm getting at?
You say sorry? Repeat that last sentence again.
That the oppression is a result of them being slaves.
No, I'd say the oppression is going to be the removement of legal personhood that comes under chattel slavery. So the very definition of chattel slavery means that they are chattel, they are property, they are items. So
That
you're
that is abundantly
dehumanizing
clear,
them.
and that's what
That
one
by
thing I
definition is a form of oppression.
let me find the dictionary. Hold on.
That's okay. You can use dictionary.com, like that talks about how they're
Okay.
commodified.
Because I see how you're arguing, and I so it's very similar to the Black Hebrew Israelites. So let me use the dictionary. It says oppression is the cruel, unfair, and an unjust use of power, authority to keep people down.
Yeah, I've got
Okay,
no problem with that.
so dictators can be oppressors, right?
What you say?
But not dictators can be oppressors, but not necessarily enslavers.
Yeah, they can be, yeah,
And
sure.
that's what I said. That's why I said it's not necessarily
Okay, cool.
correlated
But
to, yeah.
that's fine. I'm not arguing that oppressors have to be slave owners. There are many dictators that weren't
And
necessarily
that's what I
slave
just
owners.
said. I said
But
earlier,
that wasn't what we were talking about.
but
I
that was what
asked
you.
you the question:
Mhm,
does chattel slavery
mhm.
by definition involve oppression? And you said no. And that's
And
where
I
we
don't think you
disagree.
asked it in that way.
No. You can ask Des in the comments. Like that's exactly what we said. I asked,
Wait,
you
hold
don't
on.
think chattel slavery involves oppression? And then you said no, and I started laughing.
No, that's and I'm
I'm just
saying when
relating.
you ask question in the same in and that's when then this is you changing your words, and this is something that Christians do lie.
I
And I'm
mean,
gonna pull.
we can
Listen,
roll the clip back. I
I'm
did
gonna
not
I'm gonna
change my
roll the
words
clip
once
back
before.
because that's not the way you ask the question, and you are lying here. Hold on.
Okay, please roll the clip back
Let me.
and play it out loud so we can all hear it.
Of course, everyone will hear. Let me find the clip because
In
when
fact,
you,
I never even mentioned the word dictate. Where did that word even come from?
I
What?
said dictators.
Exactly. You brought it up like 5 minutes, like 2 minutes ago.
So
Like, what are
you
you
said
talking about?
you claim that I forgot how you asked the question, and it's and I always say this, the way you word how do you call it, a claim or a question actually determines how you receive your answer, right? So
Yeah,
you
just
worded
just run
it.
the clip back. We'll see what that says.
Okay, hold on, let me see if I can run the clip, and let me know if guys if you can hear the clip.
Animals or monkeys and primates, whereas the
Can you
white
guys hear the
race is going to be
playback?
one Yeah, I
Okay,
can hear it. advanced
okay,
and
let me see if I can find the way.
better and superior.
Obey your earthly masters and so on until slavery.
So the word property isn't going to the idea, um, negate the idea that these guys have personhood. Rather, it's going to make reference to the fact that they're under their owner's jurisdiction until they finish off paying off their debts.
Listen,
So
and
I've already
y-
reconciled that verse. And again,
yet again,
you're still not engaging with Exodus 21:16, which openly condemns the very practice that exchanged those people over
wait,
with
wait,
the
hold
death
on. Which
penalty.
verse did you
You're
say?
not engaging with that.
Which verse are you saying?
Exodus 21:16, you're yet to
Okay,
engage with that.
let's
Exodus
open.
20
Let's hold
21,
on.
you're yet to engage with that.
Exodus 22. Which verse was it again?
21.
22 verse 21, right? And as I
That's
said,
talking about oppression. Yeah.
and it says again, do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner from where. Is that what you're talking about?
In regards to chattel slavery, yeah. By definition, you have
How?
to oppress.
How do you
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like it's this weird pseudoscience category where not
Wait, why'd you
only do
stop
we
it? Go
classify
back to where we were just
people.
at.
know where you originally said it? That's why I'm going back to find where you first
No,
made the
that's it
question.
was literally about it
That
was
was not
literally
there. That
right
was
after that.
before. Just hold on.
No,
Let me.
it was right after
um
that. What do you mean? I
who
remember when I said
hide
it.
their racial characteristics, like having blonde hair, blue eyes, and you have eugenics philosophy that the Nazis believed in, but you also dehumanize other sorts of humans for lacking those characteristics. So, for example, the Jews and their nose size and their head shape, um, black people and their eye shape and the kinkiness of their hair, all of those kinds of things, right? Making them appear to be more like animals or monkeys and primates, whereas the white master race is going to be ones who are more advanced and better and superior in all ways than the black people. These ideologies at their core underpin the basis of the transatlantic slave trade. And if those ideas at their core contradict Christian theology and Christian teaching amongst various different sects and established branches of the Christian faith, it's going to lead to the conclusion that the transatlantic slave trade is incompatible with Christianity. There are Christians who commit mortal sin. There are
Wait, hold on,
Christians
hold
who
on, hold
sin
on, hold on,
against God
hold on.
in multiple different ways.
I want you
But
to go
yeah, go on.
back. I want you to go back. So you said that, and I wanted you to repeat what you said last. That is what is incompatible with Christianity.
The theology that underpins the transatlantic slave trade
Hmm.
is incompatible with Christian theology. And
And
I've shown that in multiple different
and
ways.
that's what I'm saying, that it is not true.
Well, then you have to contest with the weight of evidence that I've given you to show that it's
And
going to be true,
listen, uh,
including the references
the
from the Old
the
Testament.
uh, the
Um,
transatlantic slave trade being the fact that I have pulled up multiple verses to show to you that in the Bible that you hold to be true, it says you can have slaves, and both in the Old and the New Testaments,
mhm.
on especially the book of Peter and so on, or in the Matthew, about slaves obey your earthly masters and so on.
Oh, I'd love to go there.
Of course,
Yeah, we can go there
these
too.
are things that constitutes and prove that yes, Christianity is actually intertwined, in which deeply connected to slave trade and slavery.
Yeah, but the problem is with that you're gonna have to reconcile is the fact that I've already reconciled every single one of those passages. I've conceded that there are forms of slavery, i.e., indented servitude,
Hmm.
that are going to be permissible in the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Hmm.
I've conceded, and I can
And chattel
concede
slavery and
that
chattel
in
slavery.
that no chattel slavery isn't going to be consistent with those things
Chattel
because of
slavery,
other
so
hold on,
far
hold
as
on,
there
hold on,
is an
hold on.
action of
I'm
purchasing of
trying to respond to
slaves,
you.
of purchase
Hold
of
on.
slave, that is chattel
Can you
slavery.
define chattel slavery for me?
Of course, the action in which you buy or trade a person, or at least in terms of movable goods, that is chattel slavery. The
Um,
exchange of people with money, that is chattel slavery.
Actually, I would go a bit further, and I would say that chattel slavery means that the individuals don't have any legal personhood. So, if we're talking about chattel slavery, right, it
Hmm.
means that you're classing an enslaved people as a chattel, which means they're going to be a movable personal property rather than a legal person.
Yeah.
Now, even in the scriptures that you brought that talk about how their slave own or the master owns their slave, Still under Old Testament preconditions, every single human being, including the foreigner that's going to be in your land, isn't going to be allowed to be oppressed, isn't going to allow to be vexed, and is still a human being made equally in the image of God and the likeness of God,
Yeah.
which means they're going to have personhood. So even under the Old Testament's perspective of human beings, everybody, including the slave, which is the reason why in the New Testament the Bible says there is neither slave nor free, because human by their makeup and by their humanity, all of them are going to share the characteristics that make them to be a human person. So the word property isn't going to the idea, negate the idea that these guys have personhood. Rather, it's going to make reference to the fact that they're under their owner's jurisdiction until they finish off paying off their debts.
Listen,
So I've already reconciled that verse. And again,
yet again,
you're still not engaging with
mhm.
Exodus 21:16, which openly condemns the very practice that exchanged those people over with the
Hold
death
on. Which
penalty.
verse did you
You're
say?
not engaging with that.
Which verse are you saying?
Exodus 21:16, you're yet to
Okay,
engage with that.
let's
Exodus
open.
20 to
Let's
21,
hold on.
you're yet to engage with that.
Exodus 22. Which verse was it again?
21.
22 verse 21, right? And as I
That's
said,
talking about oppression. Yeah.
and it says again, do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner from where. Is that what you're talking about?
In regards to chattel slavery, yeah. By definition, you have
How?
to oppress.
How do you
Yeah.
link?
You don't believe that oppression is linked to chattel slavery?
No, no. What I'm saying is that how do you link
Wait, hold
foreigners
on. Do you
to
believe
There
slaves?
it is, right
oppression
there.
is linked to chattel slavery?
Oppression? Not necessarily.
Yeah,
There
what?
you go. That's the clip. You just said you don't believe that oppression is linked to chattel slavery,
I
which
didn't
was
say that,
exactly
and
what our
I
debate was
said
about.
not
You just
necessarily.
said no, this is it. So what
Yes,
does that mean?
and that's why I made the reference of being a dictator does not mean you are enslaver. You remember that
That
one?
doesn't. That can be. Those two claims can be mutually. Those two claims are mutually exclusive. It can be true that you can be a dictator and not be an oppressor, but it can't be true necessarily speaking that you can engage in chattel slavery and not be engaging in oppression. Because at the very core of chattel slavery, you're involving legal oppression where you dehumanize people as property or chattel. That's oppression.
Okay.
Like, what are we doing here?
Let me tell you one thing. When you asked
You
the
don't think
question,
dehumanizing people
let,
is oppression?
of course I do believe that dehumanizing
Okay,
people
so
is
child
oppression.
slavery is oppressive. Thank you.
Well, of course I know that chattel slavery is oppression. You don't
So
have
you
to
just
tell me that.
so why did you say not exactly?
You asked the question, right? If I believe that oppression is linked to chattel slavery,
Which you just told me it is.
I said,
But earlier
and
you said not exactly.
earlier on I said it not necessarily, right? That was
So
what I
you've
said.
changed your answer.
I haven't changed my answer. That was literally what you said, and I said not
So you
necessarily.
still don't believe that oppression is exactly linked to chattel slavery, even though the definition of chattel slavery involves oppression.
And I'm saying that, listen, oppression, right? To oppress someone, right?
Yeah.
In terms of in which we speaking of oppression, because I will say there are different forms of oppression. Okay, there is let's say the oppression that comes after you enslave somebody, and there is oppression that you have to put in place before you enslave somebody, and that is the distinctions in which I make. So
So
it
there's
is true.
oppression before and after.
What? Of
So
course, there
there's
are two
oppression
different things.
before.
There's a difference between
I'm
the
not. I'm
oppression.
not. I'm agreeing they're distinct. I'm saying
Yeah,
there's still distinct forms of oppression before and after,
you
which
are
means that
you're
under
agreeing
your
with
view,
me.
there's still going to be oppression. So
Of
you
course,
actually agreed with me earlier. So when you said not exactly, you were wrong.
I said
You've
I did
just
not necessarily,
negated that claim.
not necessarily, because I wanted to make this
But it is
distinction. Yes.
necessary.
What?
Even if there's going to be different forms
Hmm.
of oppression, it's still going to be necessarily true that there is going to be oppression linked to chattel slavery.
Of course. And
Okay, so it
indentured
is necessary.
servitude too. And the same lies with indentured
That's
servitude too,
conjecture.
not only chattel slavery.
Okay, so now that you've conceded that, we can go back to the discussion as to whether it's compatible with Christian teaching. And again, those verses that I brought up, right? Exodus 20:21 and 21:16, directly contradict and undermine the very undertone of chattel slavery, which requires you to dehumanize
Okay.
um, a foreigner.
and
the
oppress them.
thing is, and this is the thing what I said about mental gymnastics, that you can claim, and this is what I mean, that you are hell bent about the fact that foreigner is equivalent to a slavery everybody.
I didn't say that. You're straw man in my argument.
Okay, so then make your
I
claim then.
said
So
that.
make your
I
claim to
said that.
how a
I
foreigner.
said
e-
that the foreigners
Mhm.
in Leviticus 25:44 are slaves, but the law to not oppress foreigners applies to foreigners who are slaves and foreigners who aren't slaves.
And
The only qualifier, hold
where
on,
does the
the
implication
only
comes in play?
the only implication that we know is that the qualifier in Exodus 22:21 is that you are a foreigner, meaning anybody who is a foreigner cannot be oppressed. Anybody who is a foreigner cannot be vexed. That's what the law is saying. So
And
if you're a
show me that
foreigner
law.
and you're
Show
a
me the
slave,
law.
you read it 3 times, bro.
And it says a foreigner. Now I'm saying that how
It
does
just says a
foreigner
foreigner.
is equivalent to a slave? Then I can make the same question.
Guys, I might is like I don't know if you're not tracking, so I'm gonna
Okay,
try and speak a bit slower. Okay. Exodus 22 and verse 21 says this. Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. This means that if you are a stranger, Israelites do not have the right to oppress you or vex you. Now, in Leviticus 25 and verse 44,
mhm,
the Bible makes it very clear that the bondmen and the bondmaids that you shall have will be of the heathen that are round about you. Heathen is going to refer to strangers because they're from heathen pagan nations, which means that these people are also going to be strangers. And if they are strangers, based on the previous law given in Exodus 22 and verse 21, they cannot be oppressed, nor can they be vexed, which means that we have a slavery that's being spoken of in Leviticus 25:44 that doesn't include vexing people or oppressing people. And if it doesn't include vexing people or oppressing people, and by the way, we literally have the following verses talking about Israelites selling themselves into slavery to pay off their debts. We know it's talking about indentured servitude by its context. Furthermore, we have other biblical witnesses that speak to the fact that um regarding the legal protections that were given to foreign slaves, there was no killing without a penalty. There was injury based emancipation for these slaves, and there was asylum given to those who escaped the authority of their masters. Meaning, if these slaves fled from their masters without finishing paying off their debt, their masters were not given the right to go and pursue after them. They were supposed to let them go. All of these things in conjunction is going to contradict the theology and the belief behind the transatlantic slave trade. Hence, it's incompatible with Christianity and Judaism by extension.
okay. Let's dissect what you just said. Okay, so you for some reason uh, make the equivalence of the word foreigner applies to slave, right?
No,
That the fact that it says thou shalt not treat foreigners with harshness or whatever it says, it applies to slaves.
it applies to foreigner slaves, but that doesn't mean that every
But
single foreigner is a slave.
how the question is that
Yeah,
how do you make the how they call the assumption that being a foreigner, and hello to you Mystic, by the way, I see you, and then Scott and everyone listening, um being a slave and a foreigner mean the same thing, because
I
in
didn't say
terms
that.
of English.
I've clarified this like a million times.
Oh, you haven't. I've asked you the
Okay,
same question
for the
okay.
for the sixth
Okay,
time,
for the
I'll
sixth time
clarify
I
it
apply
again.
them. Does
So,
foreigner and slave mean the same thing?
for the sixth time,
Okay.
foreigner and slave does not mean the same thing.
Okay.
However,
Mhm.
somebody can be both a foreigner and a slave at the same time. That doesn't mean that every single foreigner is a slave. The law that's given in Exodus 22 and verse 21 applies to all foreigners, whether you're a slave or not a slave. because the verse doesn't give a clause that says only if you're not a slave or only if you are a slave. It applies if you're a foreigner, period, which means any of the heathen, any of the pagan, any of the sojourners that don't come from the land of the Commonwealth of Israel,
Mhm.
you apply.
S-
So, because the slaves who are foreigners, I'm not saying every foreigner is a slave, the slaves who are foreigners in in Leviticus 25:44 are foreigners. They can't be oppressed and they can't be vexed. It's that simple. There's
what
no mental
so wait,
gymnastics
wait,
in
you
it.
mean they cannot be oppressed?
They can't be oppressed and they can't be vexed because of
Who
what Leviticus Exodus
is
22
there a
9 says.
Bible so you're making the distinction that they can't be oppressed or what, maltreated? Is that what you
They
said?
can't be oppressed. Yeah, they
Okay.
can't be oppressed.
You know, one thing that is funny here is the fact that you are making how will I say it, these excuses for you to feel better, right? When in terms of slavery and the topics around it, that you are finding ways to correlate foreigners in a way to bring such a law into the chapter of slavery to make you feel better, to make you feel better about the events of slavery. There is a treatment of slave law in which I just put up in the book of Exodus 21 that you spoke of, and this is since you didn't pull up, so I found out I will pull it up. It says, "These are the regulations you must present to Israel." That means he's talking to Moses, right? To present to the Israelites. It says, "If you buy a Hebrew slave, he may serve for no more than 6 years. Set him free in the seventh year, and he will owe you nothing for his freedom. If he was single when he became your slave, he shall leave single. But if he was married before he became a slave, then his wife must be freed with him." Okay. The first one is speaking about the Israelites, not the foreigners. Is there any other regulations that speaks on how to treat foreign slaves except Israeli slaves or slaves that are from the nation of Israel?
Yeah, plenty of them.
And which
So,
laws are they?
I'm gonna refer to number one, the emancipation laws,
Which
about injury.
emancipation laws?
I'm going to, yeah, I'm gonna go there. I'm just listing what they are first before I even go there.
Okay.
The second one's gonna refer to how you're not allowed to kill them without penalty, and number three, I'm also gonna refer to the fact that they have asylum. Um, when these slaves escape the legal ownership of their masters. And number four, I'm also going to refer to again Exodus 22 and verse 21 that says you're not allowed to vex or oppress these people. So let's start with the asylum law. Let me just bring it up for you right now. So this should be Exodus as well.
Uh, before he came, I want just ask you, your host, uh, do you have you been ever a Christian? Like, do you know the Christian, the Bible?
Yeah, I've been a Christian. I've gone to Bible school, and
Do you were like a Muslim in the first place, or were you
no,
Christian?
I've never been a Muslim, but I was baptized a Christian. Yes.
Yeah, but it seems you have no clue at all. Like you just read the
No,
line
no,
and just.
that's not what I'm saying. The thing is the way he's arguing, and I'm very familiar with the way he's arguing. You know, what when people argue in that way, it makes it difficult to speak because the argument is not consistent. It changes because of the form of in which they argue. So it seems like they're making a lot of sense, but actually they're not making a lot of sense
Yeah,
All
I
right, yeah,
mean,
I've got the
people.
verses by the way when he's ready.
because it doesn't make sense how you can correlate words that mean different things to make them mean the same thing.
No, I think you're actually just struggling with the fact that Christians, for the entirety of the abolitionist movement, over 400 years and thousands of years of Christian teachings, have came to the exact same conclusions that I've came to, which has led to the abolition of one of the most abhorrent slave movements of of human history. I don't think it's one of the worst. I think
and
the Arab slave trade might actually be worse, but that's a
and
different
I'm telling
discussion.
you that's not true, because
Um,
the majority of
and
people
I
who
mean,
actually
again,
spoke against
we can
or was
we
against
can
slavery
go
were
into the history.
non-Christian. But yet again, bring out
That
your
wouldn't
fact.
that wouldn't mean that therefore Christianity teaches that slavery is okay. That would just mean that all of those Christians could be condemned with mortal sin.
Okay,
Again, back to our conversation
bring it up. Yeah, bring it
injury
up.
on yeah, so on injury based emancipation, we're just gonna look at verse 26 of Exodus 21.
Okay,
It
let's
says,
see.
if a man smite the eye of his servant, notice how the servant isn't given a qualifier as to whether they come from Israel or not Israel, or the eye of his maid, that it perish. The Bible says he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. In other words, if you injure one of your slaves, you're allowed the slave is to be let go, because you're not supposed to injure people, which means that slaves um are granted emancipation based on the provision that they're going to be hurt by their masters, teaching us that you're not actually allowed to hurt you're not actually
Okay,
allowed to hurt your
hold
slaves.
on. Let me pull up
Um,
the verse. You said it was Exodus.
it's the same chapter, verse
Exodus. I don't know
26 and
how.
verse 27.
Exodus 26, 26, or
No,
21, 26.
the same chapter, verse 26 and verse 27. It
Okay.
says, if a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid, that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let
No,
him
no.
go free for his tooth's
Let,
sake.
let me let me
So it's speaking
read
about
it.
the
What?
concept of emancipation based
Okay.
on the injury
Don't
of the
don't read
slave.
it directly. It says, if a man hits his or female slave in the eye, and the eye is blinded,
Yeah, that's an
yeah,
injury.
he must let the servant go free and compensate for the eye.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which shows that you're not allowed to injure your
But it's like
slaves.
when you're reading these things, just read it in its whole entirety. Don't
Wait, did
paraphrase
I
from it,
not just read the whole thing to you
bro.
in the KJV?
You
Okay, you
didn't.
just lied, but okay. You know, I'm gonna ignore that lie because that's a blatant
How
lie.
is there a
But
lie?
I'm gonna move on to that.
What you
I'm just
said,
gonna
right?
move
Let
on
me
to
let me
that.
pull up the KGV.
Yeah, read the
The
KJV. It says
KJV
exactly what
one.
I just read.
Wait, it wasn't.
26 and verse 27. Tell me what I didn't read out of that,
Okay.
please. Because you just lied.
Probably that one is that way. Let me see. That's why I don't like the King James version.
But I told you from the start of this conversation I'm near the KJV. So why are
Hold
you
on,
being dishonest?
hold on. Let me pull up the uh, Bible Gate. Oh, give him the King James version. Damn.
I mean, I can read any up. Funnily enough, the translation that you read actually helps my position even
But
more
that's
than the KJV.
you see. Let me tell you the reason
That's the
why I
funny thing
read
about it.
the
Like,
reason. Let me tell you the reason why I read the NIV, because the
do you know what?
NIV.
I'll read the NIV for sake of argument.
Okay,
I
read the
don't really care.
NIV because it's easier for people
I
to
don't really
understand
care.
the KJV, because it's without a
It's
these
actually
and a
harder,
those.
but okay.
Okay.
Um,
What
yeah.
translation?
So the NIV says, even though I don't know why you have to do this, an owner that hits his male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye, and the owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or a female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. What's the principle that's being given here? Similar to an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It's the idea that if you harm somebody, if you cause injury to somebody who's going to be your slave, by definition, they have to be emancipated. And by emancipation, you're letting these slaves go free. This isn't going to be present under the transatlantic slave trade, where they regularly beat black people, lynched black people, hung black people, tortured black people, embarrassed black people, and done all sorts of terrible things to black and transatlantic slaves to embarrass them whilst under their provision, and they were not granted emancipation based on their injury. And in fact, many slaves often actually died if they never escaped the rulership of their masters. That's proof that, again, this law is incompatible with the transatlantic slave trade. Then we also have asylum for escaped slaves that I quoted earlier. That's going to be in Deuteronomy 23 from verse 15 to verse 16.
Okay.
And that says in the NIV, thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant that is escaped from his master. Oh wait, that's KJV. Let me change it back to NIV. It says, Wonderful. It says, if a slave has taken refuge with you, do not hand them over to their master. Let them live among you wherever they like and in whatever town they choose. Oh, and look at that term again. Do not oppress them.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we have laws that are explicitly
Mhm,
given not to return escaped slaves back to their masters,
mhm.
and not only to not return them, to allow them to live among you wherever they like, in whatever town they choose, and not to be oppressed.
Okay.
How on earth can this be compatible with chattel slavery?
Okay. And as I make the how will I say the argument earlier that firstly it was with the acquisition of slave. In any form of slavery, you have to acquire slaves, right? So how is the acquisition of slaves, being the fact that you have to buy them, is not
I've explained that
compatible?
already.
Sorry,
Yeah, sure. So the
how is it that
acquisition,
it's not compatible with chattel slave? I mean the transatlantic slave
yeah, I never
trade.
made the argument that slaves aren't acquired in chattel slavery. I'm saying that the means by which slaves are going to be acquired in chattel slavery
Mhm.
and the means by which slaves are acquired in Leviticus 25:44 are different means. For example, if I go and rob a bank, I acquired money. But if
Mhm.
I go to the bank and I use my card and I withdraw money, I've also acquired money. So the fact that I acquired money in both cases doesn't mean that I'm doing the exact same thing, nor does it mean that I'm
No,
acquiring
I
that money
think
by the
I think
exact same
the other
means.
one.
So
That's why we use the
you're making
distinction.
a
That's why we use the
you're
distinction to withdraw. You
yeah,
withdrew
and the
money.
distinction I've already
Yes.
given you what the distinction was in
Listen,
Leviticus 25:44, and you just claimed that it was mental
you see,
gymnastics without
let
actually
me let
giving
me
an
tell you one
argument.
thing. Let me tell you one thing. One thing is this, and I think I've understood how you like to argue. The thing is this. When we speak, right, there's a reason why the same action have different words for them, right? Even though the action is the same. Okay, i.e. theft. Okay, in terms of in which people should, as you say, acquire money from other people forcefully, is it's called extortion, right? But in many cases, if it is done by the government, it's either called in terms of being a fine or something, or you have to post bill if you are in prison for it, even though it's the same action, acquiring, taking money from people who where in which the money don't belong to you, and that's the thing that it is. But I see how you particularly argue where you try to use the same word to mean the same thing, which it makes it how do you call it, uh, very funny and very particular to discuss with you, because fine, the actions are the same thing, but there's a reason why there are different words for them. So listen, one thing, and this is the fact that it is problematic to you that there is or Christians were involved in chattel slavery. That is evidently, and that is true. Secondly, that you are finding ways to justify uh, how do I call it, that if you are true as a Christian, you won't participate in slavery because there are verses that says or speak on how to treat slaves and foreigners and so on, uh, various instances, right? But there are also verses that contradict that saying. But there's, for some reason, you are neglecting the fact that yes, it can say one thing, but the opposite is true in the next verse. And I
Yeah, I
think that
mean,
is why I call it mental gymnastics, because you are making this mental gymnastics, and we've made almost spent 2 hours, just trying to clarify the same thing that I'm clarifying now.
yeah, so I think the issue with this conversation is I think there's a lot to learn on your side, I would say. And I grant
Listen,
that you maybe used to be a Christian at one point, but I'd
there's
say that there's a lot for
let
you
me
to
tell you one
learn
thing. There's one thing
in
that
light
you
of
you have to you
in
have to
light of
understand. It's
biblical
like
interpretation.
when
And one of
you
those things is that when you're talking about um interpreting scripture, right?
Mhm.
There's a difference between descriptive truths and prescriptive truths. Something that's descriptively true focuses on how things actually are or were in reality, whereas a prescriptive truth focuses on how things are supposed to be in accordance with a rule, a standard, or a value. So when you're interpreting laws about slavery in the Old Testament, of course, we as Christians go by both the Old and the New Testament. The application of that needs to be studied contextually to understand whether these things are going to be prescriptive truths about establishing law and order in our current societies, or descriptive truths about how the Israelites were supposed to order and value their societies. Now, again, going back to this circle about mental gymnastics, because you mentioned something about the word of buying, the word about buying and acquiring that's used in the Bible. Well, the Hebrew word that's used for buy in Leviticus 25:44 is kana. And lexically, that term denotes a commercial purchase or an acquisition, not a violent seizure. And by the way, we have Hebrew words that do refer to violent seizure in the very same book and in the very same Torah, which means that the text envisions a market, a legal market transaction rather than kidnapping, stealing, or raiding somebody, right? So the word kana in the Strongs and the Brown Bridges both define kana as getting, acquiring, buying, and possessing, with commercial purchases being one of the core senses around the 73 different times that the word kana is used in the Old Testament. That same word is made reference to for buying land, for buying cattle, for buying property, even in the book of Leviticus 25 and verse 30, which reinforces the idea that the range of the word kana centers on a legitimate transaction rather than forceful taking. So Leviticus 25:44-48, scholars will actually note that that verb carries commercial weight, meaning it's a transaction about ownership, distinguishing it from theft or capture, which is what we're going to see in the transatlantic slave trade. So I've just shown you from the Hebrew again and the context again why that word buy isn't going to be making reference to forceful seizing. What's your argument against that?
Let me pull up the verse about the claim I wanted to make about how Christians contradict each other every day, making it
That that
seem
that
like
that can be true, and that will
making
still
it
not answer
seem
the
like
question
it
that he's
is a
asking.
it's
I
a
feel like
like
you're the
a
one who's doing mental gymnastics, Sam,
it's like
because
a it's a
you just told me that you're complaining about other Christians and what other Christians do.
I'm
I'm
talking about
asking you to
Christians
engage in the claim.
in general, and that includes you.
Yeah, I don't care about other Christians in general. I'm
Let
asking
me
you to
find the
engage in
full
the claim.
context of the this one, Deuteronomy 21:12-14. Read full chapter.
I feel like
Just
you're the one who's doing mental gymnastics here. Like,
okay, just
I've
hold on.
answered every single one of your questions. I've given context. I've given pretext. I've given examples of how
Just hold
other
on.
Christians interpreted this in history. I've shown you how abolitionists use the exact same things that I use to come to the same conclusion that I come to. Like, I don't know what's going on here. I think the only one that's really
Vent.
doing gymnastics is you as the ex-Christian that doesn't want these things to be true to suit your narrative. And by the
Okay.
way, I used to be an agnostic, so I wasn't always a Christian for the entirety of my life.
Okay,
In
hold on.
fact, I actually
Hold
used
on.
to believe that the Bible was a brainwashing.
Okay. So it speaks on something about acquisition, right? And it says this.
Forceful acquisition?
Hold on. When you go to war against, hello Scott. Scott, how do you do? When you go to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands, and you take captives. If you notice among the captives a beautiful woman, and are attracted to
So
her.
we're going to a completely different
Oh,
verse. Okay.
hold on.
So we're just not going to
Why are
engage.
you talking? Just let
This
me
is so
read.
dishonest.
Let me read.
Nah, this is dishonest,
Okay,
Absalom.
of course,
This
that's
is
what you
dishonest.
Christians do. Hold on. And this is what I'm talking about,
You
a
just ran away from my
contradiction.
point.
I didn't run away from your point. I'm trying to make
So
your
you
point.
told me, no, I asked you
Mhm,
a direct question.
mhm.
What is the Hebrew word that refers to forceful acquisition in the context of buying things? And then you went to a completely different verse
Bro,
talking about acquiring slaves
I don't
after
speak
wartime.
I don't speak.
That's a different
Listen,
discussion.
it's the same discussion because we are
No,
talking
it's
about.
not.
Listen,
Oh my God.
listen. I don't.
You're doing
You can
so
ask me.
much
Listen,
coke right now.
you can ask me the
Like
French
you are
word,
actually
the
coping.
German
You're
word
coping so hard.
for something because you wanted to prove your point. But the point I'm trying to make is the one in the
No, I'm
Bible,
asking
because
you
you are
to
saying that you
justify the
can't
claim that the
actually.
word "by" refers to forceful seizing in Leviticus 25:44. So
Listen.
even if we were to concede that that Deuteronomy or whatever you just brought up now is
Mhm.
speaking about something different, which I know it is because I'm familiar with that scripture,
Because
it's
let me
going to be
let me tell you one
irrelevant
thing,
and
and
a
and,
non
and
sequitur
that's why I
to our
say the way
question. You're just
you
dodging.
argue is this.
Stop dodging the questions,
Of course,
bro.
and
I've
that's what I'm
answered
trying
all
to
of your
answer the
questions
question.
directly.
Hold on a bit.
You're
Okay,
dodging.
you
I'm
you
sorry,
are
that's
you are
bad.
making the claim. You are making the claim that I should make the proof that the word "by" doesn't speak on forceful seizure, and that's one thing that is evident that
The
it was
word
saying.
by in Leviticus 25:44 doesn't
Mhm.
speak about forceful seizure.
Of
So
course.
again,
Oh,
I'm
that's
going to
evident. That's
okay,
evident truth. So I
if
don't
you've
understand why
conceded
you
that, okay,
put an
fine.
emphasis.
If
But
you're
here,
conceding that,
but here,
if you're conceding that,
what?
show me the word that does in the Hebrew, and then we'll analyze that usage.
Okay, and that's what I'm trying to say. Obviously, the word "by," does not speak of about forceful seizure. I understand it. That's why I'm
Okay.
not even
So
spending
is your
time.
argument that Deuteronomy 21 does?
What?
Is your argument that the word for by, if there is a word for
Okay.
by in Deuteronomy
The,
21, is your
my
argument that it
argument
does?
is this, and I'm gonna speak this in plain English. Is this that it says to the Israelites that to be an Israeli or an Israelite, right? Your slaves are to come from the nations around you, and from
I
there you
agree.
can buy slaves.
I agree.
Of course, it doesn't say
Yeah.
anything about forceful seizure. I don't know why we're spending energy. Oh, do you concede to this? And because
We're
it is
spending
evident.
energy about forceful seizure
Yes,
because
and
forceful
and
seizure
what
is what happened in the transatlantic slave trade.
and what one
Which
thing
means if it
I'm
doesn't
come
say
to
anything about
I'm
forceful
trying
seizure
to
from other nations, you can't use those scriptures to justify the transatlantic slave trade, which is the
listen,
entire point of our
listen.
conversation.
Hold on. And this is
You
I'm going to
can't
put the
try.
references. What I said was that the Catholic Church was among those who put in motion the transatlantic slave trade. That I said.
People who belong to the Catholic Church did. I don't
Okay,
disagree with that.
I don't
But
care.
that doesn't mean that
Listen,
Catholic dogma or
listen,
Catholic doctrine affirms the transatlantic slave trade
listen,
because they openly condemn it.
listen.
Like,
Where,
what are we doing? We're just all over the
where,
place.
where does it say, right, that slavery is forbidden in the Bible?
Oh my goodness gracious.
Okay, let's say I'm
What
stupid. Where does it
kind of
say it?
slavery?
What?
What kind of slavery? Because you telling me slavery is forbidden, I could
Mhm.
argue that nine to
Okay,
fives are a form of slavery. So what kind of slavery are you talking about here?
it is not. It doesn't define as slavery. You can claim it to
I
be
believe
slavery.
you can. There are actually definitions that I could use that could make 9 to 5 be a form of
Listen,
slavery.
what
Again,
is 9 to
can you
5? What is
answer
a
my
9 to 5?
question,
What? Okay, let's say either or. I'm gonna make it
brother? Stop
easy.
being dishonest.
I'm gonna
Stop
make
being
it either
dishonest. Like
or.
you're not
Either or.
answering any of my questions directly.
And I said either
What
or.
kind of slavery are you saying you don't want to be prohibited? What
I don't
kind?
want to prohibit it, or
Because
I
this
said it's not
conversation was
prohibited.
about chattel.
Yes, chattel
Yeah,
slavery is not
which kind
prohibited.
of slavery?
Chattel
Chattel
slavery,
slavery. Okay,
yes,
so we're talking about chattel slavery.
yeah.
Where does the Bible say that chattel slavery is prohibited? Exodus 21:16, Exodus 22:21.
It
Done.
doesn't say. Does it
Case
say?
closed.
Does it say
Yes, it
that?
does.
Does it say that slavery or chattel slavery is forbidden? Like it says, "Thou shalt not kill,
Ex
thou shalt not lie," and so
son
on.
of
Does
man
it say
steal
exactly
and
those words, or
yeah,
you are
it
making it
does.
seem
It
that way? It
again, that's called
doesn't.
an exact word fallacy. That's a logical fallacy.
Of course,
So
of course. And, mhm.
an exact word fallacy is
Listen,
when you stipulate that a
listen,
term has to say these exact
listen.
same
And
words in the exact
I'm not
same way that
gonna,
you made it. Exodus
um
21. I know you're not
listen, listen. I
like you're
understand how
scared.
the
You're scared
arguments
to
you're trying
engage
to
with
make.
somebody that's what they're talking about. That's the
I,
problem.
I understand the argument you're trying
Deconstruction
to
is not
make,
the smartest thing
right?
going on, man.
And the action
Victory,
is
just
this.
hit the mute button. This motherfucker doesn't stop talking. I can't
No,
hear a
no.
word you're saying.
You know
Just
one
mute
thing,
him,
I have been speaking with him for 2 hours, right? And he's speaking
right?
in like how the Black Hebrew Israelites speak, the Americans when they do come here. And for some
Yeah,
reason,
they interrupt.
it's not about
I
the
mean, you've
interrupting.
interrupted me multiple times and
It's
haven't
about
actually been able to
the
answer a
choice of
single
words,
question.
and this is what is very very familiar with the Black Hebrew Israelites, right? In which the choice
Yeah,
of words are used particularly to affirm their, how do you call it, the arguments, and in terms of in which they neglect
Do I should
actual
use
meaning.
terms that don't affirm my arguments?
Is
Like what?
And he
What are you
interrupts again,
talking about?
and it's just
I know,
it's
but
bad.
He interrupted me multiple times. That's why I'm not
Just
showing him that
if
courtesy.
you hit
I'm
the
sorry.
mute
Like,
button,
if you
if you
weren't
hit the mute
interrupting me for
button
the
and put him
majority of
back
the
in the
conversation,
comment section, then that way
yeah, then you can
he
just
will
show
be
that you're
able to
running and you're scared
interrupt.
to debate. You can.
just yes, I know that he's making this decision because I've let him speak, and I think he spoke like the 8% of the time, either way. But yet again, it's about the choice of word in which he uses, right? So, for example, it speaks of for foreigners, but for some reason he finds a way to call it to other things for it to apply to other things, and I think that is the particularness of how the way he debates. That this sounds like he's speaking a whole ton of logic, and the reason why I'm actually refraining from using big words because, and one thing I understand about arguing is that if you are arguing and you use big words just to, it sounds like you're a hell of smart and all the thing. But if you can use simpler words to explain the things that your point you're trying to make, that makes you more, if actually more smarter. So,
Yeah,
so
I said Galatians 6 through 17, I think, because it speaks to this as to how man tries to fool other people with their ideas of God, but
That's
God knows
exactly what Mr.
God
Victory is
knows
doing,
the
by the way.
God knows the difference. Like it's
That's
using
exactly what Mr.
using
Victory is doing.
scripture to justify horrible acts of humanity is the exact reason why I do not follow Christianity at all
What's your
anymore.
justification for
Because
slavery being immoral?
see,
what is what?
interrupt,
Host, what's your
question.
justification for slavery being immoral?
What
Outside of
is my
Christianity, of course.
what is
Because
my
you're not a Christian,
definition
right?
that slavery is immoral?
No. What's your justification for slavery being objectively immoral?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, in your worldview. How is it
No, he
objectively
doesn't. He
immoral?
doesn't want you to answer. He wants you to
No,
engage
I'll
to
go on mute. I'll go on
the
mute.
point,
Right.
so that he can interrupt and provide his definition
Okay,
over
if
top
I
of yours
interrupt,
before you even
Okay.
answer.
Host, if I
So
interrupt when you're interrupting me, when you're speaking, I'll happily drop down. So I'm
Okay.
asking the question
you've
to the
done
host.
nothing but
Can
since
you,
I've been started
the host,
listening an hour ago.
no problem. That's
It's
good for you,
retarded.
mate. Good for you,
So
mate. Cry about it. So, host, the question was,
Mhm.
can you objectively justify why slavery is immoral in your worldview? I
It's
can in my
immoral.
worldview.
Okay. I can. Why
Yeah, how
slavery isn't or is immoral?
is immoral? Why it is immoral?
Why is it immoral? Okay. First and foremost, the impact of slavery, both to people who are enslaved and people who do the enslaving, the impact of it is what we have today, especially when you see people like Indians, Africans, and I'm talking about the actual Indians and the Africans and so on. That is one, which is clear today, is identity crisis. Secondly, inferiority complex. Thirdly, it is what I classify as self sabotage, in which people don't collate things that come from themselves to be good enough. Therefore, they intend to value what came from the Europeans to be better. I'm gonna just leave it to those three so you can speak.
Yeah, sure thing. So you didn't actually answer my question. What you done is you gave me reasons as to why you personally believe it's going to be immoral. So you gave the reason of identity crisis. You gave the reasons of self-sabotage. You gave the reason of how it promotes having an inferiority complex about yourself, where you believe that others are going to be better than yourself, which I think you actually suffer with when you were talking about how you have oppressors earlier. But that's a different discussion. These things by themselves don't actually provide an objective justification as to why these things are going to be immoral. It just shows me that according to your own personal preferences, that you don't believe these things are going to be good, right? So to provide an objective justification, um, would mean that you're going to have a grounding outside of yourself and a principle that justifies and states why these things are going to actually be wrong outside of your own personal opinion, because somebody else can make the claim that they believe that personally black people being subhuman, having identity crisis and self-sabotaging themselves and suffering from an inferiority complex is going to be a good thing under their own personal perspective, and they could just use the exact opposite argument that you used, and because there's no moral symmetry breaker to justify which one of you is going to be right or wrong, both of your opinions have the exact same weight. So again, what's the objective moral justification for the claim that slavery is immoral under your worldview where there's no God?
Listen, I based all of my explanations on real life events, also the effects of slavery, and that's what I listed, so that's
Okay,
easier
so
to
you're a
comprehend.
consequentialist.
Of course, whatever it may
All right,
be, I'm
cool.
not familiar with that word, so that's one. So these are the
Can I
reasons
define the
why.
word for you so that
So
I know
so
whether you
so
actually
so
believe it?
so you are saying so because but first and foremost, let's find your standpoint. Where do you stand in terms of slavery? Do you think it's immoral or
Yeah,
is it moral?
I believe that chattel slavery is going to be immoral, but I
Mhm.
have an objective basis to justify the claim that chattel slavery is immoral. I'm
Okay,
saying in
make
your
those claims then.
worldview, huh? Yeah, sure. So, in my worldview, the reason why objective morality is going to be possible is because I have a normative reason rather than just a cause. In other words, I have facts that favor the belief that it's going to be rationally concluded that this thing is going to be is going to be immoral. Now, in regards to chattel slavery, I'm going to simply make the argument that the same argument that the emancipationist movement and the abolitionists made in the 20th century, which is that chattel slavery is going to be a direct infringement upon alienable human rights. So they're going to be grounded in the image of God and his likeness, and therefore all forms of chattel slavery are going to be immoral as it directly harms the image of God and its likeness. You, under your perspective, aren't going to have any objective moral basis or justification for the claim slavery is immoral outside of your own personal preferences. Under a consequentialist
Wait.
perspective, which basically just means that
When you
we
ask me the
judge things
question,
to be
right?
right or wrong based on the
Just
consequences that they
hold on. I
have.
want to ask you a same question before you move on, right? You asked
Yeah, go on.
based on my personal purview, without me
Yeah, but
quoting
you asked me
anyone.
for mine.
You therefore used explanation that someone else made to justify your claim.
What'd you say?
Didn't you quote what someone else's made? Someone else's justification? Is that what you said?
No, I gave you mine.
No, you said that in order to use for make it, you're gonna use the claims that abolitionists made. That's what you said.
N- Yeah, I'm not saying that's the reason why I believe in it. I'm just telling you as a normative fact that
Yeah, but that's
the
what I said. You said
abolitionists
you
made the
are
same
going to
argument
use
that I made.
the same. You see, and
Yeah,
now
because I also believe that
this is it.
that just
Okay,
means
this is
that
it. This is it.
hold on, wait, don't
Listen,
interrupt me.
one
That
thing I
just
think
means
is
that the
funny with you is that
abolitionists
you ask
that just means that the abolitionists had the same argument that I did.
one question for someone else in one way, but for some reason you alter the way you ask the question for yourself in ways for you to make you sound like you are actually speaking sense or saying something differently, but you're actually saying the same thing, right? So I think, and people who have like this is the same Black Hebrew Israelite kind of argument that you are making, you know, or am I mistaken? And Scott,
No, you're very mistaken.
bro, I have the
So
same the clip in which you answer
no,
the
we don't
question.
make the same claim. I bet you that Black Hebrew Israelites are heretics. So what you
No,
talk? We don't make the
what
same
I'm
claims. At all.
saying is that when you ask me the question within my own, okay, without quoting other people, right?
I
What
didn't
are
quote anybody.
bro?
The only reason why I reference people who do the emancipation and people that were part of the abolitionist movement is I'm referencing them to tell you that they used the exact same argument that I did. In other words, the emancipationists and the abolitionists had the same belief that I have. That doesn't mean that it's true or I only hold it to be true because that's what they believe to be true. Those are two
Listen.
different statements.
Let
You're
me
not
tell you one
tracking
thing.
very well.
Let me tell you one thing. The statement that I made is universal truth. That means whether you like it or not, right?
Yeah,
Whether you
it's
go
universal.
up,
My thing is also universally true.
listen.
Whether
But
the
why do
abolitionists
you try to
believe in it or not would be
frame
true.
it that it is not true? Let me tell you one thing. And then I
Yeah,
think I
I'm
spoke early.
framing the reason why I'm framing your perspective to not be objectively true
Mhm.
is because you can't ground it in anything other than human preference. I
Human
grounded
preference or
my
human experience,
yes, both. That's still going to be down to preferences.
bro. How can
Because
human
again,
preferences?
your because
Okay,
consequence because consequentialism states that we judge an action to be right or wrong based on the consequences that that action is going to have, right?
okay.
So, under your perspective, based on the human experiences of black people suffering with identity crisis, having an inferiority complex, all of those kinds of things, predicated upon those, slavery or chattel slavery is going to be immoral. But I'm saying there's no moral arbiter to validate that claim to be true outside of yourself or outside of any human experiences, which means it's only going to be subjective to human experiences. For
Listen,
something to be
listen.
objectively morally true,
One thing is
it needs
this.
to be objective. That means distinct from human experiences.
Oh my
So
God,
whether any human said this was true or not, this thing would always be immoral.
bro. Bro. At this point, I'm wondering whether you are. I don't want to use the words. Everything within this world is based on humans and human experience and human interactions. Therefore, you don't make
I
laws,
disagree.
bro.
That's a paradigm claim. You're just assuming your claim to prove that it's true. That's
Oh,
good begging the question.
the fact that I wasted
Like,
2 hours of my life
I
arguing with
mean,
you.
look, man, if you want to speak to somebody else, that's fine. I think you're pretty bad at tracking arguments. I think you need to take a look at logical fallacies because you've committed multiple of them in the time of our debate.
I think
You've made multiple claims that you haven't been able to. I've made multiple questions to you that you haven't been able to answer, or when you
because
do answer,
you
you
see,
take about 7 minutes to finally get to the answer of the question,
you,
and then
you know,
complain when I interrupt you.
one
Like,
thing that is
if
funny
you
is
want to complain about it, that's
listen,
fine. But the
listen,
only one that's really
listen,
done mental gymnastics here is going to be you. It's
listen,
not me.
listen. One thing that is evidently clear: the fact that you are claiming, oh, Scott, doesn't everything within this world that especially has to do with human interaction, it is either classified or defined by humans because it's a human thing.
Most things, sure,
Your name is not
but that
Scott.
wouldn't mean
Let's
that
Scott. Let's
that
Scott.
wouldn't mean that judging
Wait, your
that
name
wouldn't
is
mean
not
that
Scott.
judging things that wouldn't mean
Your
that you
name
judge
is not
things to be
Scott.
moral.
See, this
Who's
is this
Scott?
is the point. Like, why you've wasted?
There's no
You're
Scott
right.
on the
You've
line. What are
wasted
you
2 hours on this guy trying to break through to him, and he's done nothing but interrupt you, not listen to you, push his wants, needs, narratives on you without your ability to answer, and it's rude.
Except I have given him the
It's
ability to answer multiple
no,
times.
you interrupt him.
He just lacks the
Before
ability to answer because he
before
hasn't got substance. In fact,
before
if
he
you
gets
actually
to his
scroll back,
answer,
does the
and
host have YouTube? Sorry.
much like this, you just keep interrupting. And
Yeah, I mean, he cut me off like 5 minutes ago. I'm not gonna give him the
oh,
courtesy of not interjecting because he didn't give me that
courtesy, you haven't provided any courtesy to anybody on this thing for the last
Actually, I
hour.
did multiple times at the
None
start of our debate.
whatsoever.
In
You
fact,
interrupt.
I went on
You
I went
interrupt.
on mute,
You
and you can ask
interrupt.
the host
You
this before you were
interrupt.
here.
You
I
interrupt.
went on
You
mute for
interrupt.
about 10
You see
minutes
how
to
hard
allow
this
the
is to
host to roll
communicate
back a
like
clip,
this when you're
just
talking
because
like
the host
this and
wasn't
you
able to track.
interrupt and you can't. No one hears anything anybody says. It's
I actually
difficult.
allowed the host to go and use
You
AI
haven't.
to fact check
You
me, and
haven't
I went
allowed
on
him to
mute for
finish a
3.5 minutes,
sentence
bro.
in the last
Like, what are you
hour.
talking about, man?
Bro, you never allowed me. I used my AI, and you especially specifically said that, or you didn't
No,
want me to
you
use it
used
anymore.
AI to fact check me mid
See,
debate,
just
bro.
mute
Yeah,
him. Just mute him. Just mute
exactly,
him.
and
It's
that's what
okay,
I
man. I'm
do in
gonna go
this
speak to
live.
somebody else that actually knows what they're talking about because I feel like I've had a long discussion with you, and you don't seem to be willing to engage with the prompt. You seem to want to be dish. You seem to want to gish
Bro,
gallop,
you
um,
haven't engaged with
deploy a
anything.
plethora of
Bro,
logical fallacies.
you
I
have
refute every single one of your arguments, and then you act like I haven't refuted them,
listen,
and
listen.
then you
It's
just
it's
claim that
okay.
I'm dodging or I'm not responding to you
No,
because
no,
I've
it's
given you
okay.
an
It's
answer that you
okay.
don't
It's
like.
okay. It's okay. We don't
It's
have to
just
continue.
piss poor communication.
We don't have to
That's all it
continue.
is.
Yeah, poor communication. The arguments that Christians have used for thousands of years that
It's
still
okay.
stand the
It's
test of
okay.
time.
It's
I'm
okay.
sure it's poor communication,
It's
bro.
okay. Just
Fuck Christians.
All
yes.
right. Well, God bless you, and thank you for your time, regardless. Host, sorry. Thank you for your time, regardless. I'm sure I'll take a look at your YouTube page afterwards to watch about this debate because it was very fun for me.
Yeah, you should do. And there are multiple debates there too. And do come next
And what's the name
Sunday
of your
when you
channel,
have.
please?
It's the same as my TikTok name, Mr. Victor G.
Leave you to take care.
Yeah, the same as the TikTok. Just it will be posted once this live is done, so that you can listen again, and I will listen because I will have a debate with you because we've talked about Black Hebrew Israelites, and Scott, you are very familiar with the way they speak, and it's like they speak in ways that when you are trying to understand how they are making the claim, because it's like there's one thing that people are actually debating to win, and people actually debating to understand. And I think he's debating to win an argument. And that's not what we do here. We learn from each other. So the fact that I was fact checking him, I didn't like that in the beginning, but of course, I don't
No,
know.
they
I
never do.
Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to say. So I have to make sure it is true, so that when I do references to what you claim, then I know it is true. But then there's a way that it's like one thing that he did a lot was to ask me question in one way, but then change, alter the word. It means the same thing, but the definition becomes different, or the way you answer it becomes different because of the way he changes the word.
It's
And I think,
only it's because their understanding is the only correct understanding, and if the Jewish lawyers for Israel at the South African uh, what was that at the UN, the meeting they had that where South Africa brought forward Israel's genocide, war crimes, all those things. The lawyers for Israel argue in the same manner. Their narrative that they're selling or that they're trying to portray or communicate to other people, it's done in the way that this guy was doing it. Interrupt, push the narrative, back it up with your own findings or your own scripture, your own understanding of it, your own definitions, and it it doesn't match up with other people's understandings of the scripture or other people's uh, you know definitions. The it's very bothersome to me because it's the same colonization tools of using scripture to justify horrible uh, conditions for people. It's sad using God like that, but Galatians 6 through 19 speaks about that, how people use God to justify all kinds of things, use scripture to justify all kinds of things. But in our hearts, we all know chattel slavery is not great. Any form of slavery is not something that promotes the healthy spirit, a healthy soul. None of it does. But that's just my take on it. I don't know. I was listening for about an hour there. That guy was, I'm surprised. You have the patience of a saint. Let me just say that. I wouldn't be able to deal with people like that. I would just hit the mute button because it's mental gymnastics and just rude. But yeah, no, I sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you guys because I thought maybe you were gonna break through. you, you, you didn't quite break through, but he kept on resorting back to uh, interrupting you, saying that you don't understand what he's trying to tell you, or that you are confused, or your definitions don't match his, your understanding doesn't coalesce with his. It's God, it was painful. It was painful for me to have to listen to that and have you sit there and try to deal with that. But yeah, maybe next week we can talk about other non-religious things. I'm sorry, I was raised Catholic, but I'm still of the opinion that religion is where the critical thought goes to die, and that's kind of where I'm at with that. So Uh, yeah, I'll send you a message throughout the week. Cheers.
Oh shit! I've been talking for so long and I've muted myself. How funny! So I've actually been talking for 5 minutes and I've muted myself. Wow. So what I was saying is that it is very particular in the way he argues and so on. That the fact that he uses the choice of words and so on. But yet again, that is beside the answer. The answer is the question is, can a belief system be healthy if living it means losing your family? And it's one thing that we quickly understand that being part of a religion in many cases is tied to the perks and the benefits in which you receive from your family, and to in what degree you can participate in the family. So you find yourself in cases where people decide to leave their religion, all of a sudden they are um, excommunicated in the family group, or sometimes exiled in many cases, and in the worst case scenario, many people are get killed for such actions. Okay, um and that there are other ways in which, and Scott, yeah, I was speaking to you, but also my microphone was muted, so I couldn't even fathom that you didn't hear me. Explains why. But in other cases, I think it's very particular that we have to ask ourselves the question: is the belief in a god tied to your family? That can people within the same family actually believe the same thing? It happens in rare occasions, but the majority of the fact is, if people should, or a family should find themselves predominantly Muslims, Christians, Catholic, whatever it may be, and one person should deviate from the family's norm, then that person is seen as not good. And it's one thing that yeah, I said, yeah, people are texting me, I was muted. Yeah, one thing that is actually evident that uh, it happens, and I think believers out there should actually speak to why they have excommunicated their family members who have left the faith that they held or they do hold to be true, and then people who do embrace them despite the fact that they have left or changed faith. Why do you do the same thing? I, for one, am under the impression, or I live under the rules of the fact that you can believe in whatever you want, but I am not going to change my lifestyle to support your need, or to further your faith or whatever it may be. I will support you in any way that I can, without it infringing of on myself, but that's where I live my life. But the fact, the one thing that is true is that, and why do people who believe, for example, if your mother or your father, your sister, your brother decide, you know what, I no longer want to be part of this faith, then why is it painful to you? Why is it that you do not allow yourself to accept the fact that they no longer want to be part of this faith, but I want to be part of my family? And it's one thing that many religious people have to take into consideration when we speak on these things with the time that is left. So, and the second one is, can you deconstruct religion without becoming anti-religious? And it's one thing that it goes hand to hand. It happens at the majority of time, but there are few occasions in which it doesn't happen. There are people who believe in the faith. They might criticize the faith, but they are not anti, that are like not against it in any way, shape, or form. And you find yourself in the majority of the West, and so on. There are people who might be opposed to Islam, in ways of in which they interact with Muslims, or Muslims interact with them, the way they view Muslims, because of the way Muslims do act, or other people of different ethnic groups or faith act. And so these people are judged by such actions. But then people make the claim that, oh, well, Muslims are not supposed to be. It claims, it says in the book, you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z, i.e., what the guy was gentleman earlier was actually making, that you are supposed to do this as a Christian. But we see the fact that the books and the actions of the people who hold this faith is opposite of what the book says, and therefore we are able to draw the correlation that these people draw their morality, their inspirations, and so on, probably from the books in which they hold dear. It might be false, but the people who, how will I say, suffer at the hands of Christians, people who suffer at the hands of Muslims, they judge Muslim based on what they experience, or the exchange of experiences between the Christians and the Muslims and those who do not believe in. So, i.e., slavery. And I've made this example multiple times, that if you encounter people who have only had bad experiences with Christians, i.e., people who were alive or eyewitnessed slavery, these people will find it hard to believe in Christianity. And the same way, one can make the same argument with people who experienced or eyewitnessed slavery, or the acquisition of slave by the hands of the Arabs or the Muslims. They make the same claim that I will never be part of this because this is morally evil. And the gentleman make the claim that, oh, well, I'm making the claim based on experience. And I'm like, yeah, that is a strong case to make argument and conclusion based on experience. And I think every human being, and every in many laws that we have today, is based on experience. Usually laws come after something happens. So the new laws are the aftermath of an incident. So the reason why they will say you should drive slower, probably someone crashed. The reason why we put speed bumps is because people drove fast on that road. So we put system in place as the aftermath. So the fact that people are disregarding arguments based on the aftermath, I think, is very particular. And as I say, it's correlated to the Black Hebrew Israelites kind of arguments. And I don't know why I spent 2 hours of my life actually arguing with this guy. I thought, as Scott said, I thought I would break through, but it's almost impossible to argue with Black Hebrew Israelites, or that kind of mentality, because when they are hell bent on it, it's almost like a mental gymnastics. And I'm like, I'm trying to find the fact that the guy always find ways to bring new words into a conversation that has nothing to do with those words. And it's like, I'm gonna give it to him the way he they study. Black Israelites are good at studying the Hebrew text, and they are excellent in this mental gymnastics, in ways that when you do argue with them, if you're not careful, if you even hold a degree in the subject that you are speaking about, the way they argue will make you even doubt your degree. And it's one thing that is very, very how do you call it, very particular to them. And if you're not patient, you will lose your temper. So then I make the claim that being spiritual, not religious, mean You have deconstructed. And it's one thing that many people who are especially or of Black American origin uh, make that statement that, well, I am not Christian, but I am spiritual. And there's a particular reason to why people make those claims. And the reason is that they, in many cases, do not hold the belief to be true in ways that they are expected to. Either they are church hurt, or B, they've had bad experiences with people who hold that faith. Therefore, they choose to pick and choose portions of the religion to feed into the lifestyle that they want to live, to make them not feel spiritually empty. Therefore, they make the claim that, oh, well, I believe in God, but I'm not religious, meaning I'm not a Christian in the traditional sense, but rather I am a person who believe in the God, and that is the claims that many people. Well, that's the reason why I put it on the board, and to with extension to Muslims and so on. Yes, there are some Muslims who have been previously Muslims that have left the faith, and the matter of the fact is they then be an advocate or a channel, a spokesperson against Islam and the expansion of Islam. And I made the argument earlier about the expansion of Islam in Europe, especially by people who haven't achieved the same, how do you call it, expansionism within their own country. And I made the colonial references that, okay, prior to Europe being able to conquer the world, they had to conquer Europe first. So when I make the claim that, okay, if a Pakistani, a Somali person wants to spread Islam to be the normal religion in, let's say, the United Kingdom and so on, I, for one, will say I want to see it happen in Pakistan first, to see it function in a way where it is beneficial to the people, where we don't see cases where there are maltreatment, there are misuse of scripture, misuse of the Sharia law, and so on, right? But before people making the emphasis of implementing it elsewhere. Other than that, the only clear intention is that this is a hostile takeover. And that is per my view, that it is a hostile takeover if you haven't achieved it elsewhere, to prove the point that yes, it is achievable, it's doable. Other than that, it is a hostile takeover. And that is what we saw in many cases of expansionism, in terms of in the name of God, and the Christian God or the Muslim God, right? And these are the things that are factual, that when people haven't achieved or find a way to implement these ideologies in ways that will benefit the new society in which they find themselves, it always end in some kind of colonization, some kind of oppression, and so on. But these are normal human behaviors, and we have countless of reasons to believe so. The Arabic, as in Saudi Arabia, banned multiple, how do you call it, Islamic linked groups in which they believe they are Muslims. But the Arabs say that you can't be more Muslim than we Arabs. You can't be more Islamic than us. So if we are to ban these groups, the Islamic Brotherhood, and so on, why is that you people are tolerant and accepting to them? So, because yet again, it's based on colonization. People do not want to, be colonized in one way or form, or and I would say that are actually, and this is a question to many Muslims that are out there, and if you are listening, the question is, when people who claim they are doing things in favor of Islam, be it good or bad, but you see that the place in which they act those things is not favorable, or the way they go about it is not favorable, why don't we see enough of Muslims speak against? Is it because people are afraid of the Muslim rage and so on, or is there anything else? So yes, so the final question on the board is, can fear survive after belief disappear? And it's one thing, yes, it can survive, and I've seen it countless of times where people who deconstruct from religion and colonial ideologies, do still hold on to these fears in which they have. The fear of hell, one thing, because you once believed that this is true. Therefore, now, when you find yourself within a space in which you don't have to, you know that you don't believe in it anyway, but sometimes it has a way to play some kind of a role in your life, or some kind of plays a deep, how will I say, has an effect on your life. And there's one thing that is evidently true. I know people who are deconstructed from Islam, but do have Muslims in their family, or their family are still Muslim, so they find way to be Muslims when they are with their family. But then outside of the family network, they are, you know, atheist or whatever they might be. And these are things that are true. So then we ask ourselves the question: when someone chooses not to believe in a religion, a faith, why is it that you fear for the person? And I've seen that to be multiple times, that people rather fear for your life when you claim that you are not part of a religion, or you don't subscribe to the God of the books, right? And yeah, it's uh it's one thing that is true, and it's been a almost 3 hours, people, and I'm sorry I spent 2 hours of my of this life with this mental gymnastic, trying to prove a point in which got me nowhere, where I could have spent actually we discussing these topics. But I'm gonna run this topic back, where we can actually discuss it and people can dissect it and speak on the topics of being formally religious or not, or people actually going back to religions in which, or finding religion in which they didn't subscribe to. So people who have liked, subscribed, commented, and participated in life, I do thank you. As people who are joining for the first and listening from the for FYU page, the For You page, we do this every Sunday. Yeah. So until next time, people. I'm tired. So bye bye.